Good afternoon. I'm Robert White, Council Member at Large and Chair of the Committee on Housing. Today is Tuesday, October 8th, 2024, and we are meeting in room 500 of the John A. Wilson Building. The time is now 12:06 p.m., and I'm calling to order this public hearing. The purpose of this hearing is to consider B25-827, the Pets and Housing Amendment Act of 2024. I introduced this bill in May after working closely with GW Animal Law Program, DC Voters for Animals, volunteers and staff at HRA, and numerous others interested in meeting the needs of people and our pets. Since we began our work, the bill has earned support from local pet owners, local businesses, and national pet advocacy organizations, including the ASPCA, the Animal Policy Group, the Humane Society, the Michelson Center for Public Policy, the Veterinary Medical Association, and many others. We will be hearing from many of those supporters later today. Fundamentally, this bill recognizes that for many of us, our pets are part of our families. Once we build a bond with our pet, we can't imagine living life without them. They are there for the important moments in our lives, providing us with loyalty and emotional support. And when we look for a home, it must be safe, affordable, and welcoming for our entire family, including our pets. The bonds we have with our pets are real and carry us even when we are in crisis. We have all seen people living outside with few belongings left, but still holding their dog or cat. Too often, residents will stay on the streets unless they can be sure there is a safe place to go without losing their relationship with their pet. So this bill is designed to reduce the cost of pet ownership by capping pet rental and security deposit fees to a reasonable amount. The bill also fights outdated stereotypes about dog breeds by finally banning discrimination breed on a pet's breed, size, or weight, and to ensure that no one is left on the street because of their love for their pet. This legislation requires DHS to ensure that at least one low-barrier shelter is available for residents experiencing homelessness who need a safe space to be with their pet. We don't need any more barriers to people seeking safe, clean shelter off the street, and our move to non-congregate shelters may open new opportunities for residents to safely live with their pets. Of course, our housing market is incredibly challenging right now, and it is more important than ever to ensure the health and well-being of both tenants and housing providers. But there is evidence that providing a welcoming home for pets reduces tenant turnover and the costs that come along with it. And no reasonable housing provider bases their business model on added fees and charges that are unrelated to the actual costs. As we've seen in buildings across the city, it is possible to ensure that tenants with pets have a fair and affordable opportunity to live with their whole family. While housing providers can still pay their costs, I hope the conversation today will help us find that right balance. I'll also note as we worked on this bill, I was always hopeful that my dog, my rescue pit bull, Roscoe, would be around long enough to see the introduction. He was 14. We introduced this bill in May. We lost Roscoe in June after 14 years. And I'll share that his last bit of energy he gave to my girls, Madison and Monroe, who are 5 and 8. As he was in his last moments, he wouldn't take water, wouldn't really do anything, wouldn't move around. But when the girls wanted to say bye to him, they, of course, because they care about him, brought him water, and he lifted his head and drank it, which he did for them, not for himself. And he passed after that. And I think, those girls in our family were important to Roscoe. Roscoe has been important to us. He's been through all the milestones we've had in 14 years, which includes moves, career changes, and additions to the family that he tolerated very well. He became a girl dog, attending and dressing up for tea parties. So I'm very glad and grateful to all who worked on this bill, for this bill, and particularly grateful that I got to introduce it while Roscoe was still with us. So thanks to everybody who worked on this. I'm going to call up our public witnesses. We have posted the witness list on the council's hearing management system website, which you should have received from my staff ahead of this hearing. If you're a registered witness and are here in the room, please listen closely for your name. If you, and we may switch up the panels a bit because I know some people have demands on their schedule, so we will combine some in-person witnesses with some folks testifying virtually to make sure we are as respectful and efficient with people's times as we can be. If you indicated that you planned to participate virtually but are here in person instead, please let my team know at the side of the dais there. For witnesses joining over Zoom, when I call your name, the committee staff will promote you from attendee to panelist. You'll see a pop-up on your screen and you'll have to accept the promotion to join the panel. You'll then drop out of the Zoom momentarily and will come back in as a panelist. Public witnesses will have 4 minutes to testify, and advisory neighborhood commissioners testifying in that capacity will have 5 minutes. At about 4 p.m. today, if we are not concluded, I will have to recess this hearing very briefly as we need to hold a committee markup on several time-sensitive pieces of legislation. That won't take terribly long. We'll resume this hearing after we finish the vote. As a final note, if you see us looking down during your testimony, it is typically because I am taking notes and my team is managing the Zoom part of this hearing, not that we are not paying attention or on social media. It's important that people know that. Please know that we are listening very closely and very much appreciate your testimony. I'll now call up our first panel of witnesses. Let me confirm that Max Broad hasn't joined us in the room. Okay, so we will start with Catalin Peter, Isaiah Nicholson, Susan Riggs, Senior Director of Housing Policy for the ASPCA, Maggie Sullivan, Government Relations Manager for the Animal Policy Group, Jessica Simpson, Senior Public Policy Specialist with the Humane Society of the United States, Kaylee McNeil with the George Washington University Law School's Animal Welfare Project, Andrew Murphy with the GW Law Animal Welfare Project, Dr. Jenna Dockweiler with Embark Veterinary, Miss Aubrey Lopez, and is that it?
Sorry, yes,
And-
just the highlight.
Sorry about that. There we are.
So we may have
And Catalin, Peter, I see you with us. Welcome. You can begin your testimony.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman White. My name is Catalin Peter, and I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs for the Apartment and Office Building Association of Metropolitan DC, otherwise known as AOBA. Our members manage approximately 116,000 multifamily residential units all throughout the district. I believe that that is the most recent number. Admittedly, I'm here today with not an entirely full scope understanding of the legislation and exactly how it would impact all of our multifamily housing providers. Our housing providers are dedicated to not only our human friends and our human residents, but also our furry friends. And we want to get a better understanding of perhaps where the bill is originating from. We have many housing providers who, some are affordable housing providers, some are much higher end. Some of our higher end providers provide a very broad range of luxuries for their furry residents. This spans from stations to clean the dogs, perhaps even daycare centers for dogs, and some housing providers may not have as many resources. They may be a bit more limited. So when we see the bill, we do believe that there are nuances in terms of how you can best maintain and manage your property, and you can operate it safely and effectively, while also giving full faith and credit to our furry friends and not only the emotional support that they provide. Councilmember White, I see myself when I walk around, and many of our unhoused residents in DC, they have their animals with them. And I cannot imagine as a pet owner going anywhere without my animal as well. So I appreciate the sentiment. And AOBA is here and willing to work with you. And I'm very curious and interested in hearing the testimony from those who are in the veterinary space and to learn more exactly about how the bill came about. And what we'd like to do is to be able to work with you all to ensure that housing providers across the span and across the continuum of housing are able to manage their properties while also providing a safe haven for furry friends. That is all for today, and look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Isaiah Nicholson, who is with us virtually.
Yes. Good afternoon, Chairman White and members of the committee. My name is Isaiah Nicholson. I'm a Ward 4 resident, and I would like to wholeheartedly express my support for the Pets in Housing Act. Not only because it directly speaks to my experiences as the owner of a gentle, loving pit bull mix, but because it helps to even out the playing field for people in my community to access more affordable housing in the District of Columbia. When I was a renter, finding an affordable pet-friendly apartment was difficult. Not only because I needed to find a building without breed or weight restrictions, but because of the seemingly never-ending list of fees that could be tacked on to your unit. In my last apartment, I paid a $500 non-refundable pet move-in fee and was charged $65 per month in pet rent. I'm sure landlords will claim that these fees are necessary to mitigate additional risk of damage, but it is important to also remember that landlords already have several avenues available to them to recoup costs incurred by their tenants. And while I think it is completely reasonable to pay a little more for a pet-friendly unit, it is completely unreasonable to expect the average DC renter to be prepared to pay an additional $1,200 per year to guarantee housing with a pet who many of us consider to be family. I'll also add that fostering a dog, cat, or any animal through a rescue and possibly saving them from the euthanasia list becomes completely unaffordable when you have to pay exorbitant pet rent and non-refundable fees. Now that I am a homeowner, I've been able to foster multiple dogs, and if there is any opportunity to expand the bill, I would strongly support including a prohibition on breed discrimination in insurance policies. Not only would this expand policy options for homeowners or renters, but it would also support large and small landlords seeking breed inclusive coverage for their properties. There are also broader implications of breed bans and how the discrimination of dogs perceived as dangerous bleeds into discrimination against the people who own them. As a half African American, half Puerto Rican man in America, I've experienced this in my own life, and I've also heard similar experiences from others. Earlier this year, I was having dinner with a family friend whose pet-friendly apartment building in Ward 6 unexpectedly implemented a breed ban. And what was the immediate result of this new policy? The building lost most of its diversity. Ultimately, by the very nature of making housing more affordable and accessible, this bill will benefit people of color in DC and anyone who prioritizes bringing a shelter pet into their family. The Pets in Housing Act would have really helped me when I was a renter, and I'm deeply grateful that unchecked fees and harmful and unfounded dog breed restrictions are finally being addressed. I'm unfortunately able to stay for the Q&A portion of the panel as I need to get back to a work event, but I thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Understood, and thank you so much for being here to testify. Susan Riggs, Senior Director of Housing Policy at ASPCA.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair White and members of the committee. My name is Susan Riggs. I'm Senior Director of Housing Policy for the ASPCA. So my sole purpose in this position is to remove barriers to pets in housing. 97% of pet owners consider their pets to be part of the family, but sadly, the cost and availability of housing that allows pets is an increasing challenge for loving and responsible pet owners. This is particularly true for renters. A national study conducted by the ASPCA found that those who rent are more likely to need to rehome their pet for housing-related issues than for any other reason. Breed and weight restrictions, pet-specific rental charges all serve as a barrier for pets and their people, and that is why we strongly support the solutions proposed by the Pets in Housing Amendment Act. The ASPCA has been actively engaged in developing new pet-friendly housing laws at all levels of government, including the drafting and implementation of a statewide law in Colorado that served as a model for this act. Through this experience, we continue to evolve our thinking about the best practices for creating more equitable access to cost-appropriate housing for families with pets. To that end, today I wish to respectfully offer some recommendations for your consideration as the act moves forward. And I just want to caveat that with some of my colleagues that we've been working in coalition with will offer some more rationale for these things and kind of speak to some of the nuances. So let me start with pet deposits. Pet deposits should be regulated and managed in the exact same manner as security deposits, meaning they are reimbursable, being deposited into an interest-bearing account, documenting any deductions to the deposit and requiring any funds not required for repairs to be returned to a tenant within 45 days. Pet deposits are charged to protect a landlord against potential pet-related damage to the interior of the housing unit. While landlords state that pet rent is often charged to mitigate for an increase in maintenance and cleaning needs to the common areas of the multifamily property. For example, wear and tear on landscaping, increased debris in the lobbies, stairwells, elevators, common areas. However, not all pets utilize common areas. There's indoor cats, there's pets in cages and aquariums. For this reason, the council may wish to limit the imposition of pet rent to pets that regularly use those common areas by reserving permissible pet rent to non-indoor pets. There's an opportunity also to increase equity in the structure of the act. The quality of finishes and the cost of repair for properties vary widely dependent on the age and the value of the property, the quality of construction and the finishes. These factors tend to be reflected in the rental rates. So structuring pet deposits and pet rent as a percentage of the base rent rather than a flat amount acknowledges these rent differentials and adjusts these costs to better reflect the incomes of the households living in those properties and the potential cost of repair and maintenance. So you actually set it as a percentage of rent rather than a flat fee. In addition, both pet rent and pet deposit should specifically be assessed on a per unit rather than a per pet basis. Finally, I really appreciated the former speaker's allusion to renters liability insurance. This is a very important component as states and local governments act to rein in pet-related rental costs. Some landlords are requiring tenants with pets to acquire liability insurance as a condition of accepting pets. But unfortunately, most insurance carriers refuse coverage and or impose higher premiums on households with dogs of particular breeds. The exclusion of these breeds could have an effect of exacerbating surrender of those breeds to those maligned breeds to local shelters and rescues. Several states have already intervened by prohibiting insurers from considering breed in underwriting insurance policies. Instead, these states require each dog to be underwritten using data that has a correlation to potential aggression, such as historical temperament and behavior. And it's important to note that this would not hinder insurance companies' underwriting of a particular risk. By promoting pet-friendly housing, the District of Columbia has at its discretion the ability to open up more pet-friendly housing opportunities, reduce the strain on local animal sheltering and rescue organizations, strengthen communities and families, and improve public health outcomes. We ask for your support of the act so that fewer households are faced with the difficult decision of giving up their pet. And I don't know, Chair White, if you saw my girl back here. Bella is very sorry for the loss of Roscoe, and my heart goes out to you and your family.
Thank you so much. And thanks to Stella. We eventually started listening to you, Susan, after we finished getting distracted by Stella. So thank you both for being here. Maggie Sullivan, Government Relations Manager for the Animal Policy Group. Welcome. I can see you with us virtually.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair White and members. My name is Maggie Sullivan, and I represent Animal Policy Group. Animal Policy Group represents over 85,000 veterinarian professionals, animal welfare organizations, as well as leaders in animal health. And we are in strong support for the Pets and Housing Amendment Act of 2024. For a little bit of background, in DC, as in many parts of the country, pets are cherished members of our families. Today, approximately 2/3 of American households include at least one pet. This translates to about 85 million households across the nation. However, we must also recognize the challenging economic realities that families face, with 1 in 10 households living below the poverty line. For these families, the struggle to maintain a stable home often leads to difficult decisions regarding their pets. However, pets provide essential companionship, emotional support, and joy to their owners. Research shows that simply petting a dog or cat can reduce blood pressure, lower cholesterol, and significantly improve overall heart health. Moving on to the current challenges in housing. Despite the desire for pet-friendly housing, 59% of pet owners across the US say pet-friendly housing is too expensive. An alarming 24% of pet owners have had to move due to housing, and 14% have had to surrender their pets because of their housing situation. In regards to the resident and landlord perspective, 76% of property owners acknowledge the significance of pets for families and are willing to accommodate them. And 83% of owners agree that pet-friendly vacancies are filled faster, and residents in pet-friendly housing tend to stay 21% longer than those in non-pet-friendly units. This translates to a greater security and revenue for property owners. Furthermore, 71% of residents believe that pets contribute to a sense of community and increase resident satisfaction and retention. This act provides a balanced approach to pet ownership and housing by allowing a reasonable pet security deposit, restricting excessive fees, and supporting unhoused individuals with pets. By easing restrictions on pet-friendly housing, we not only improve the lives of countless animals and their owners, but also create a positive impact on the housing market. Again, Animal Policy Group is in support of this act, and we ask for your support as well. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you so much. Jessica Simpson, Senior Public Policy Specialist with the Humane Society of the United States.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman White and council members. My name is Jessica Simpson. I'm here on behalf of the Humane Society of the United States and our over 5,000 DC residents and supporters. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today in strong support of the Pets and Housing Amendment Act of 2024. The lack of affordable rental units that welcomes pets is a barrier to securing safe and stable housing. Research and shelter data show that housing-related issues are some of the most cited reasons as to why pets are surrendered. And this issue is so familiar and widespread because of the restrictive pet policies and high fees in rental housing. These types of policies effectively eliminate a large percentage of family dogs from living in most rental units and disproportionately impact low-income and marginalized communities. While breed restrictions may seem innocuous to some housing providers or worse, beneficial to the community, there's no data to support that notion. And evidence shows that breed bans do not improve public safety, but instead use up finite resources and contribute to overcrowding in animal shelters. Shelters who are feeling the pressure of high intakes and increased length of stay, predominantly for medium and large-sized dogs. It's reasonable to assume that restrictive pet policies are contributing to these circumstances. Research has found further imbalances in rental housing related to pet fees. Capping pet-related upfront and monthly fees will help correct an often overlooked inequity in housing costs. We found that monthly non-refundable pet fees, while typically not high in cost, contribute significantly to pet relinquishment, with over 50% of surveyed pet owners reporting they are problematic in our work. To accommodate for lower cost units, we recommend including amendment mentioned by colleague Susan Riggs for tenants to pay a small percentage of their base monthly rent up to the current count amount in the bill. I mentioned these policies can have a disproportionate impact on marginalized groups. One study found that, quote, while the vast majority of landlords allow dogs and cats at rental units in predominantly white neighborhoods, less than half permitted pets in properties in majority African-American neighborhoods, unquote. Biases and prejudices like these have shaped some of the most common restrictions that we see in rental housing today. Another study found that pit bull type dogs were the only dogs associated with predominantly owned by Black or Hispanic communities. And as these dogs became, more of these dogs became associated with communities of color, the fewer places they were allowed to reside. Cities started imposing breed-specific bans, as did apartment complexes, HOAs, and the insurance industry. The latter has created particularly challenging circumstances for pet-owning tenants and homeowners. As for decades, the insurance industry has been allowed to impose exclusionary policies and place limitations on policyholders without evidence that certain breeds are riskier to insure, a practice that is not supported by data. To ensure DC residents are protected from these discriminatory practices, we recommend including a provision that requires insurers forgo dog breed-related inquiries and instead focus on actuarial data. Finally, the National Coalition for the Homeless estimates up to 10% of Americans experiencing homelessness have a dog or cat. In some cities, that rate is as high as 24%. And as a result, most people will forgo shelter if their companion animal is not allowed, even in inclement or sub-degree weather. Evidence shows that people experiencing homelessness are more likely to accept temporary or interim housing if that housing is low barrier and can accommodate pets, as for many people, the path to safe shelter starts with their pets. As families around DC grapple with a highly competitive rental market and affordable housing crisis shortage, systemic and creative solution is urgently needed to help address barriers to affordable housing. This bill will help people access housing and keep pets out of shelters. I want to thank Chairman White for his leadership on this important issue and respectfully ask the committee for a favorable vote when the time comes. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for being with us. Kaylee McNeil with the George Washington University Law School's Animal Welfare Project, I think formerly with that organization.
Yes, just graduated in May.
Congratulations, welcome.
Thank you, thank you. So again, thank you to Chairperson White for holding this hearing and for introducing this bill. And thank you to the other members of the committee for being here today. My name is Kaylee McNeil, and I'm a recent graduate of GW Law, and I'm here today to represent GW Law's Animal Welfare Project. We're so grateful for Councilmember White and the other co-introducers of this bill for championing housing accessibility for DC residents and their pets. And though I am here to represent GW Law and AWP, I am also here to represent myself and my family. As a Black woman and dog mom to two wonderful rescued pit bull mixes myself, this bill is near and dear to my heart. This bill recognizes the insidious role that racial inequities have played in determining access to housing for people with pets. And I want to express how imperative it is that this legislation is passed. If you were to take a glance at any given pet policy in an apartment in DC, you will likely see a long list of banned breeds who are not permitted to live in a building because of their perceived danger. As you will hear from other advocates, a dog cannot be deemed dangerous based solely on their breed. So why do these banned breed policies exist? Take the pit bull, for example. Though now associated with dog fighting and their rumored locking jaws, in the early 1900s, pit bulls were the all-American dog. They were depicted on posters encouraging Americans to enlist in the war and featured as the nanny dog on shows like The Little Rascals. It wasn't until the 80s and 90s, as the war on drugs took over, that pit bulls, Rottweilers, German Shepherds, and other so-called dangerous breeds became associated with everything that Americans were told to fear: drugs, crime, and Black and brown folks. Pit bulls became the face of poor urban communities. And with that came policies that mimic redlining to exclude pit bulls and people associated with them from housing. It is decades of myths and dangerous racial stereotypes that promote their perceived danger today. As Jessica mentioned, a study from 2018 found that though most respondents associated dog owning with white folks, most respondents specifically associated owning a banned breed like a pit bull with young Black and Latino men. And if that wasn't enough, legislators in other jurisdictions have said the following when advocating for banning or restricting certain breeds. One legislator said, quote, "Oh, you bet if I could, I would ban the owners too. By banning the dogs, we lose the violent behavior that comes with the owners," end quote. And another said, quote, "We don't want those people here," end quote. Those are dog whistles so loud and clear that any breed could hear them. And finally, given that Black, brown, and other communities of color have been systematically excluded from wealth and property ownership in our country and in the district, removing and lessening restrictions on housing is critical for racial equity in DC. So in conclusion, we strongly support the Pets and Housing Amendment Act for its contributions to making DC a more just community. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Andrew Murphy with the GW Law Animal Welfare Project, welcome.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrew Murphy. I'm a DC resident and renter and a member of the GW Law Animal Welfare Project, and will be testifying on behalf of that organization today. First, I'd like to express, our gratitude to you, Councilmember White, in your office, for putting together one of the most exciting and forward-thinking laws regarding tenant and animal protection in our country. I'll briefly compare 3 points of this bill to a similar bill passed last year in Colorado to highlight how the DC bill is progressive while reasonable and protective of everyone, including housing providers. Legislators in California and Washington State have also proposed similar legislation. First, both the DC and Colorado language places limits on monthly pet fees and pet security deposits. DC's bill caps monthly pet fees at a slightly more affordable rate than Colorado. Both ensure that pet security deposits do not exceed $300 and refundable if unused. We would also support an amendment that would provide a more equitable limit based on percentage of monthly rent. These provisions would save renters and tenants thousands of dollars in fees that are not actually used in most situations to address damage made by a pet. In reality, according to a broad US national survey of renters and owners, the average dollar amount of extra damages caused by pets is 210, well within the proposed $300 deposit. To protect landlords' property, the DC bill explicitly highlights that tenants are still responsible for damages caused by the pet in excess of ordinary wear and tear and not covered by the deposit. We also support including a provision in this bill similar to the one included in Colorado that addresses breed discrimination for renters and homeowners insurance. Second, both bills eliminate size, weight, and breed restrictions. I echo, my support of the facts that Kaylee stated regarding the inequitable effects of dog breed discrimination. I'll add that the American Kennel Club has highlighted that some large breed dogs are the most well-suited for apartment living. Third, only the DC bill addresses the need to provide pet-friendly, low-barrier shelters for those experiencing homelessness. An estimated 12% of unhoused people own pets. Studies have shown that pet ownership can provide essential emotional support, but also serve as a barrier for people receiving certain services. DC can be a leader in providing humane shelter to people with pets by providing at least one low barrier shelter for these people. We hope that this is only the beginning in ensuring that the unhoused and others in challenging circumstances that need shelter can always have a place they can turn to with their pet. Thank you again very much for your support and time.
Thank you for being with us. Jenna Dockweiler with Embark Veterinary.
Good afternoon, Councilmember White, members of the committee, and staff. My name is Dr. Jenna Dockweiler, and I represent Embark Veterinary, a dog health and genetics company best known for our dog DNA tests. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm here in support of Bill 25-827 and strongly encourage its passage. I'm a veterinarian and currently still practice general medicine while also serving as a professional services veterinarian with Embark. So I am deeply invested in the well-being of pets and pet owners. I'm going to spend my time today focused on the aspect of the bill that would prohibit landlords from imposing breed restrictions on pet-friendly rental units. This issue is important to me, not only as a veterinarian and a leader at Embark, but as someone who has seen the negative impacts of such restrictions firsthand. An increasing number of shelters are at or beyond capacity, as dog owners face increasing economic hardships and are forced to make the impossible decision to surrender their beloved pets. It's no coincidence that the majority of those surrendered are large dogs and/or dogs who resemble breeds subject to breed-specific housing restrictions. I say resemble breeds and not have breed ancestry because breed-specific restrictions are decidedly not evidence-based. At Embark, we're pretty knowledgeable about how dog genetics work. A very small percentage of a dog's genes impact their behavior, making it nearly impossible to use breed ancestry to predict behaviors as nuanced as aggression, anxiety, or other potential problem behaviors. Additionally, looks can be deceiving, and many dogs' true breed ancestry does not match their appearance. In fact, less than 1% of a dog's 20,000 genes impact their appearance. And with so much variation among dogs in general, visual or behavioral identification is generally an unreliable way to determine a dog's ancestry. Even shelters and veterinarians like me get it wrong up to 90% of the time because the classification is a best guess based on appearance rather than genetic results. Earlier this year, Mark attended the Animal Care Expo in Las Vegas, where we held a Guess the Breed game at our booth for a dog named Zoltan. 168 shelter professionals took a guess at Zoltan's breed, and most guessed American Pit Bull Terrier or American Staffordshire Terrier based on his blocky head and stocky body. Only 2 of the 168 professionals correctly guessed that Zoltan had no bully breed ancestry at all. If Zoltan's adopter were looking for housing in DC today, he would be subject to breed-specific restrictions, despite having no ancestry from the most commonly restricted breeds. And on the other end of the spectrum, many DNA test customers are shocked to learn their small or fluffy or skinny dog actually has a large percentage of bully breed ancestry. Breed-specific housing restrictions are intended to reduce liability and the risk of dog-related harm, but they actually make people and dogs less safe by discouraging transparency between pet owners and landlords. Every dog is an individual, and every dog has the potential to bite in the wrong circumstances. More than genetics, we know that external factors increase the risk of bite incidents, such as undiagnosed pain or noise phobia. In conclusion, I urge you to advance this bill. Ending breed restrictions and pet-friendly housing to DC will help save the lives of countless dogs and will give Washington, D.C. an opportunity to serve as a model for cities across the country. Unfortunately, I cannot attend the Q&A portion of the hearing, but Embark is happy to answer any follow-up questions via email. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dockweiler. And finally, for this panel, Aubrey Lopez.
Chairperson White and members of the council, my name is Aubrey Lopez, and I'm a proud resident of Ward 6. I'm here to strongly support the Pets in Housing Amendment Act of 2024. Anyone who's had a dog knows how they can transform mental health. There are countless studies supporting this. Dogs provide emotional support and reduce stress. The APA has highlighted how pets, especially dogs, alleviate loneliness and social anxiety. They bring structure, responsibility, and unconditional love, especially for people recovering from challenges like addiction. They help foster routine and a sense of purpose. I adopted my own dog from the Humane Rescue Alliance in 2020, and I can say unequivocally that getting a dog changed my life for the better. It forced me to reevaluate my lifestyle and take better care of myself so that I could be the best owner for my dog. Beyond that, my dog Miko connected me to my community in ways I hadn't expected. I now know my neighbors, their pets, their kids. These are small things, but they make me feel rooted in a neighborhood. It's a wonderful thing to feel a part of a community. However, not everybody has access to the benefits of pet ownership, due in part to breed-specific housing restrictions in the district. There are several issues with these specific restrictions. First, these restrictions are not solving the problems they claim to, aggressive dogs. The CDC has stated there's no evidence that breed restrictions make communities safer. They don't address the real causes of dog bites, which could be poor training, lack of socialization, or access to veterinary care. Worse, these laws create hardships for well-intentioned owners. Responsible pet owners may be forced to choose between housing or surrendering their dogs to an already taxed shelter. Some try to conceal their breed-restricted dog, keeping them indoors, depriving them of exercise and proper care, which harms and stresses everybody. I've seen firsthand how breed restrictions limit adoption. When I encourage friends to adopt any of the friendly, goofy, sweet dogs in the HRA shelter where I now volunteer, I've heard concerns about existing breed restrictions in their building or fears that restrictions will make finding future housing difficult. The consequence of this is that individuals who prefer to adopt dogs rather than use a breeder are penalized. Those who can afford to buy a designer breed don't have to worry about any of this. They can spend a few $1,000s on the uncomplicated breed of their choice while sweet adoptable dogs wait in shelters for someone to adopt them. It's maddening to know that DC residents who want to adopt are left to make hard decisions while others can simply buy their way out of this dilemma. For renters, this issue is particularly relevant, and as homeownership becomes less affordable, more people are going to become subject to these restrictions. And what's more, as the previous witness mentioned, breed identification is not reliable to begin with. Genetically identical dogs can look completely different because of a trick of gene expression. Anybody who's got a sibling they don't look related to can relate to that. Two genetically identical dogs can have different physical traits like coat color, size, or facial features. How fluffy a dog is can determine whether they're labeled as a bully breed and ultimately if they are adopted or allowed into a DC rental property. Breed identification is both unreliable and a bad predictor of animal behavior. Dogs are being punished for quirks of genetics, and their prospective owners are being punished because they are renters rather than homeowners, adopters rather than purchasers of dogs. These restrictions are unproductive and create unnecessary obstacles to pet ownership for DC residents. They're also scientifically baseless. Let's make DC a more inclusive place for both pets and owners. And let's remember that these restrictions disproportionately affect DC residents who cannot buy their way out of these dilemmas. Thank you so much for your time and consideration.
Thank you so much. I appreciate this panel. For Cattle and Peter with AOBA, and they represent apartments and commercial buildings. I appreciate you being with us. So yes, we will work with you as we work to move this bill forward. I appreciate you extending the opportunity to work closely with you all. Not surprisingly, many of your members have concerns, but part of the purpose for this hearing is to get to the bottom of some of the policy issues and other concerns. So I'm glad you're with us because we're going to unpack some of these testimonies a bit, but we will also be in touch with you as the bill moves forward. So thank you so
Yeah.
much for being with us.
Yes, that's what I would like the opportunity to do, especially in terms of the insurance issues that have been raised, and to be able to talk to the advocates today who are testifying on that and their experiences within other jurisdictions. I also want to get a better sense of all of my members, again, ranging from the entire continuum of affordable housing providers to those who are providing more high-end services. I do think there is a fair amount of variation. And would be, glad to be on a small work group as this bill moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Isaiah Nicholson, I think, could not stay for questions, but you actually mentioned what I want to ask about next, and Susan Riggs with ASPCA mentioned it, a recommendation to expand the bill to prohibit breed restrictions by insurance companies. That's something I very much support and think we need to move toward. That changes the referral process for the bill. So I'll talk to my colleagues to see if they would support that as an amendment to this bill without delaying passage of the bill. So we will keep everyone updated on that. For Susan Riggs, have you seen buildings locally or nationally that do a good job of limiting pet rent and pet fees? And you mentioned, there are some pets that don't use common areas, so maybe guinea pigs come to mind. Have you seen policies that you can point us to say these might be a good starting model?
Yeah, as I mentioned in my testimony, so let me back up. So this occurrence of pet rent and pet deposits has really come out of kind of an extension of post-COVID policies. I think it's in a large part an attempt to kind of disaggregate the rent structures in order to create new profit centers. In the past, there might be a pet deposit, but, or there's an all-inclusive rent, but not, kind of parsed out like it is now. And we're seeing that in many categories, not just around pets. So this is fairly new. And so post-COVID, I think every market that we're seeing nationally is experiencing this and trying to figure out how to address it. And, obviously our shelters are feeling the impacts of that. The first place that we worked on this, as I mentioned in my testimony, was Colorado. And we've got about 9 months in now to the new law. And in that particular case, we put on pet deposits, we put a strict cap, but a percentage, as as I mentioned, that's the direction we're going in, is really looking at a percentage of rent, because that acknowledges that different levels of household incomes pay different levels of rent, and so just setting a flat fee really doesn't acknowledge the fact that not everybody can afford the same rents, and that the finishes and the age of the building and those types of things are not all the same. And so, we continue to evolve. The pet rent issue is something that we got a lot of feedback from in Colorado. And as I mentioned in my testimony, what we are being told is the reason for both of those is to account for different types of potential damage. And, I will certainly acknowledge that, when my dog, pees in the front yard, it definitely kills the grass and the bushes. And so I will acknowledge that that can happen, but not all pets use the outdoors. And so, yeah, I mean, if you have fish in an aquarium or a guinea pig in a cage, or you have indoor cats, then it's, in my estimation, it is unreasonable to charge those things. And that's something we weren't really thinking about when we were working on Colorado. But again, just kind of, starting to evolve our thinking as we're seeing different, responses to the work that we're doing and that sort of thing. So, Colorado really is the first and best example at this point of, trying to really contain some of these costs and reverse the trends of housing related surrenders of pets. But I think we can do it better, and we're continuing to think through, new policies and new ways to structure laws to make sure that we're accomplishing the goals that we want to, which is, making sure that there's not a larger impact on lower income households, and making sure that, dogs and pets of all sorts are able to stay with their people.
I appreciate that. Jessica Simpson, one of the things you mentioned, several people mentioned this in their testimonies around breed discrimination. Obviously, this is something I've dealt with insurance and in other places as well with my dog Roscoe. And you mentioned several others that there's no data to support this. This is an odd question. You can't prove the lack of something, but do you have anything that we could look at or cite to that has examined the lack of data around breed discrimination?
So there's, and a few other people have mentioned this in their testimony, the science that sort of looks at the different types of breeds of dog that exist have made determinations that visual identification is the least scientific way to make a determination about a dog. And since using visual identification is the primary way that people call out a different breed, that is really inaccurate in the veterinary space, particularly in animal shelter workers. There's been numerous studies that take a look at that, and I think that really helps support the fact that there isn't any validation. There's also been a few studies that have compared places that had breed-specific legislation enacted in their county or city or sometimes country, and seeing no increase in public safety, as that's typically the justification for having breed-specific policies. So I'm happy to provide that research for you to review, and I can provide a summary or something if that's
I
helpful as
appreciate it.
well.
Because we work with this and every other bill, we work with people who don't necessarily agree with us, and we want to get these issues right. And so to the extent that people raise specific concerns, we want to be able to share with them and rely on ourselves the best information. One of the things that you mentioned, and Aubrey Lopez, you mentioned as well, now I'll turn to you, Aubrey, that I don't think I had fully thought about the difference between rescue dogs, and there are a lot of bully breeds in our shelters that need to be rescued, and They often lose their lives if they're not rescued. But a lot of folks cannot, because of the insurance, because of restrictions in their homes, adopt those dogs. And I had not thought about the impact that has on the number of dogs that don't make it because they can't be adopted. In addition to what both of you pointed to, the economic issue, like only some breeders cost a lot of money, do you have any thoughts around, or have you seen any information on the impact of breed restrictions on adoptions from local shelters?
You know, I only have anecdotal evidence. I've been volunteering with the HRA for a few months now, having adopted my dog from there. I can say that the vast majority appear to be bully breeds. Whether they actually are is anybody's guess. And it's very sad. A lot of these dogs are incredibly sweet, social. The longer a dog stays in a shelter, the more stressed out they get. And some dogs are more resilient, some are less resilient. So the length of stay can really impact dogs' adoptability. And so having these very, very sweet dogs passed over again and again and staying in the shelter for much longer, it's a bad situation for the animal. I know people who have purchased dogs through breeders, and they've made a huge effort to go to a reputable breeder, and oftentimes they have great reasons for doing that. But I don't think that every person who purchases a dog from a breeder is doing so because they have a passion for the breed. Oftentimes they're doing it because they want to make sure that when they move, when they relocate, they're not going to have an issue with housing.
I appreciate that.
May,
Please,
I
no.
was, I was gonna say, may I ask a question, please?
No,
Oh, no,
only
no,
because
sorry.
I'm curious about the question, but once I open that door, I can't close it.
Sorry about that. Okay, thank you.
So I apologize, but send us the question and we will
Okay.
work to get an answer, because I do want to address real concerns. So let me ask this around concerns though, and I'll start with you, Aubrey Lopez, but if others have thoughts, weigh in. If I'm a building owner and I'm worried that, on the less extreme end, dogs are going to pee on the grass and kill the grass. Maybe in the middle, that they'll damage hardwood floors. And on the more serious or extreme end, I'm worried as a building owner that if one of my tenants gets bitten by a dog, that may become a legal liability for me. I guess to anybody on this panel, Aubrey, I'll let you kind of opine or not opine. But what are the arguments there? If I'm the building owner and these are my concerns, what would you say to help alleviate those concerns?
I will let other more professional people answer this. I'll just say damage to an apartment can be caused by so many things. I've had a dog for 4 or 5 years now. The most amount of damage that was caused to my apartment was by a water leak. And I don't think that any significant damage has been caused by my pet. That's not true for everybody. It's not true for every landlord, but there are so many factors that can cause wear and tear on an apartment. A pet is just one of them.
Chair White, I'm happy to weigh in if that's helpful.
Let me, I think Jessica Simpson was about to speak, and then I'll turn to you, Susan Riggs.
I know that there's somebody that's going to be speaking later that can, I think, address that question even further, who did quite a bit of research that Andrew had mentioned earlier. What we found is that the most of the damage that's caused is captured by that original either security deposit or pet deposit. And so to start splitting it out in between to various additional costs creates an additional burden to that tenant. When I was a resident of DC, I had to, my apartment flooded quickly and with sewage water, so it was unlivable. I lost all of my things and we quickly had to move to a different unit. I was with a pit bull type dog at the time and had to leave the city and move to Northern Virginia to find access to apartments that would allow her. So that was a frustrating experience for me here. And I know Susan can speak more to the insurance issue and the damage issue as well. So I'll turn it over to her.
Thank you. Susan Riggs.
Yeah, thank you. So a couple of thoughts on that. Number one, I think the best thing a landlord could do to protect themselves, both from damage, from complaints from neighbors, from damage to common areas, all of those things, is to include a strong pet policy as part of a lease agreement. Make sure that the tenants are aware of what the expectations are, and then obviously enforce that equally across the community. And we've been working with a number of different partners to develop some model language. There's great ways to do it. I mean, landlords can even consult with their insurance carriers to make sure that the policies are providing them some protection. The fact is that most incidents with pets are not aggression related. They're actually trip and falls, and so you want to make sure that to the extent that there are pets in common areas, that they're restrained and that sort of thing. The other thing I would say about the insurance issue, we have worked on this in multiple states now, trying to remove breed from consideration for renters and homeowners. We've just introduced a bill in the state of Michigan that will actually expand that to landlords as well. And so, we want to make sure that everyone is protected, that breed is not a consideration, that is not a limitation on a landlord and their liability as well. And so, that's one way to structure, to the extent that you're thinking about expanding the scope of this act, is to make sure that the insurance provisions are inclusive of all types of housing, regardless of whether you're the landlord or the tenant or the homeowner.
Well, and that's a huge concern for us in terms of the insurance and the liability. If we're coming across that in all sorts of different spheres where unfortunately those who are managing the apartments are unable to secure certain types of insurance. And I would be curious to go through the various different pet policies our members have across the board. I think that they probably do vary. And then obviously an apartment building should be able to have that contract with the tenant to make sure that they're able to offer the best possible environment for not only that tenant and their furry friend, but also for the other tenants who are in the building who may unfortunately not be so pet friendly. It's an overused cliche. It is a balancing act. It's one that we are committed to as the AOBA of figuring out and getting it right. So we're willing to work with that.
I appreciate that. I mean, I think that two things in the responses that I heard that are important. One, damage is damage, and tenants are responsible for damage regardless of who or what caused it. I mean, if it is their damage. There's also breed restrictions and pet restrictions limit the pool of likely tenants, sometimes causing people to have to move to Virginia. Unthinkable. But that is real, for landlords, and really something to think about. I think pet owners know how many people have to analyze that. Like, you may apply or not apply just based on a pet policy. I mean, that's going to be a lot of people. Andrew Murphy, this may go beyond what you've researched, but do you have a sense of what the most common damages are caused by pets?
We haven't looked into that directly. We can do a little bit more. We can look in some of the reports and see if that information is provided and give it to you. We do know that the average amount is the $200 amount mentioned. You mentioned, pee on hardwood floors.
Yes.
I'm not sure exactly where that fits in.
I'm sure it's in there somewhere. Kaylee McNeil, great work on this. Really appreciate all you've done on this. In your work or research, did you find any studies or data that you found particularly helpful or compelling around you mentioned dogs can't be deemed dangerous based on their breed, this concept? Is there anything that you might point us to, or anybody who's not sure about this bill, that might make them feel a bit better about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think I will kind of point you to our colleagues at Embark, who they're really the genetics experts there, and they have all of that data. But yes, off the top of my head, I don't have a name, but I can send you research that I looked at that supported that. Yes.
I appreciate if you're able to find it and would send it to us, I would appreciate it. Disappointed that
Yes.
Dr. Dockweiler couldn't stay because I'm curious about Zoltan and the results of that quiz. And Maggie Sullivan, thank you for being with us. Your testimony was very helpful. So thank you to this first panel. I want to make sure we get to everybody before they have to move on to other things for the day. So thank you all so much for being with us. Highlighted blue. Our next panel will be Max Broad, Roberta Humans, Kate Finman, Lauren Loney with the Humane Animal Rescue Services, Alicia Prigoski, Strategic Legislative Affairs Manager for the Animal Legal Defense Fund, Shanetta Malkia Sapp, CEO and broker for the DC chapter of the NAR PMDC and PMs of the city, Dr. Crystal Waters and Taylor Lavelli, Government Affairs Manager for the Pet Advocacy Network. And Max Broad, we'll start with you. Welcome.
Hello, Councilmember White and staff of the Committee on Housing. Really lovely to be with you here today on this, working on this exciting issue. Again, my name is Max Broad. I'm the Executive Director of DC Voters for Animals. We lift up the policies and politicians doing the most for animals in our community in the district. DC Voters for Animals advocates for all animals. That includes our companion animals like dogs and cats, animals in farms and labs like pigs and mice, and wildlife such as the snowy owl. But today we're here to talk about the Pets and Housing Act, which is, more than a pet-friendly bill. It's a measure to modernize our city's approach to housing access and inclusivity for those with cherished furry members of the family. There are 3 reasons this bill is an important step for our city's human, canine, feline, and other companion animal residents. For many DC residents, housing access is constrained because of their pets. Pets are family members for more than 1/3 of us in the district. For individuals who are elderly, disabled, or living with mental health conditions, pets offer emotional support, companionship, and stability. These are the very same people who often struggle most to find affordable housing in the first place, and the current pet restrictions in housing make the search even harder. We laud this bill for eliminating the barrier of high pet rents and security deposits, as well as breed and size restrictions to increase people's ability to land stable housing. In doing so, we can prevent situations in which somebody must make the impossible choice between a roof over their head and their beloved companion. The Pets and Housing Act, secondly, requires that DC offer at least one housing shelter that allows companion animals. This is particularly noteworthy as it's become recognized as a best practice for people fleeing cases of domestic violence who may be reluctant to leave their domicile if they cannot bring their companion animal as well. And thirdly, it's important to not lose the animal's perspective here, right? For those of us who have lived with pets, we know they form close attachments. I'm sure you all have seen pets who have been sad when we leave the house and joyous when we return. And we know that that extends beyond just that one simple act. And, when we get separated for more indefinite and permanent times, it has a real impact on the animal. And I really like this bill for being thoughtful of, supporting the animal's perspective as well. Look, I'll just say that I not only am I a DC resident, but I'm a landlord in DC and I'm a pet-friendly landlord. And I get it. There is an element that, you got to think about what's happening with the pets if you're allowing people to move into your property and how to best care for the area. But, when I envision a DC of the future, I envision a city that embraces cohabitation of our human and non-human residents seamlessly and inclusivity. The Pets and Housing Act is an important step in that direction. One we will look back on for years to come as a statement for how we consider animals as more than cargo, but for many of us, an important factor in how we decide on our housing. Thank you. I urge you to pass the Pets and Housing Act and make Washington, D.C. a more inclusive and humane city for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Roberta Humans. Welcome. If you would put the button on your. There.
Would help.
Perfect, thank you.
I don't know what your gift rules are, but I do have some pictures of a dog I took at New York Avenue shelter many, many, many years ago, who would not be able to move into a rental housing building in most rental housing units today. So I don't know if you can have them, but I have them. Good afternoon, Chairman White and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Roberta Humans. I've lived in Ward 3 for 41 years. I was a housing advocate at the federal level for my entire career and was a volunteer at the Humane Rescue Alliance and its predecessor organizations for 22 years. I'm testifying today in very, very strong support of this bill. And I'm sorry to hear of the loss of Roscoe. I recently read about that. First, I'd like to say that I think the time has really come for this legislation. So many studies mentioned already and mentioned later will demonstrate how strong the animal-human bond is. Reports differ on the percentage of households that own pets, but we know it's a lot. Pets are considered part of the family, no question about it. The Humane Animal Research Institute, I'm not sure if they're testifying, but they list top 5 benefits of owning a pet. They alleviate stress, fight depression, address social isolation and loneliness, improve physical fitness. As any dog owner knows, early in the morning, you must go out, and facilitate healing and resiliency, which is a broad word. And during the COVID pandemic, record numbers of people adopted animals, and they helped many of us get through that tricky time. Because I worked at the federal level, I was aware of many other legislative efforts to address pets in housing. Congress has enacted 2 so far. One in '83 applied to all federally assisted housing, including public housing that was designated for the elderly and people with disabilities, and it prohibited discrimination against applicants and tenants who have common household pets. And I was working with Congress at the time then. The second statute was enacted in '98, and this one covered all public housing except for those for the elderly and disabled that were covered by the earlier statute. That's all I'm going to say about them. I have a lot more information on them if anybody wants to look at them for ideas. And the DC Housing Authority is now in the process of amending its occupancy plan, which I guess, I don't know when it's got to be finalized, but I'm hoping that when they do that, they won't impose any more restrictions on limitations on families with pets. Then there's other bills. A lot of people in Congress are very interested in this too. Again, it's not DC, but I think it's something to know. Congressman Adam Schiff introduced the Pets Belong with Families Act, which then, I have to talk faster, which prohibits PHAs from imposing breed restrictions. Before they had to have them, but now you could. And then there's another bill that authorizes USDA and HUD to work together to do grants for homeless people and their pets. I am beyond thrilled, like many of the other witnesses, that the bill would not allow landlords to impose restrictions on tenancy or differential fees on rent fees and security deposits based on breed, size, or weight. Many studies demonstrate that breed-specific legislation doesn't work. They're bad for dogs, bad for the communities. Every animal is unique. I almost got bit by a little skipperkey in front of CVS yesterday, and that dog was this big, okay? And I even had treats. The only way to really determine the breed is to do a DNA test. My written testimony goes into a lot, I did a lot of research for the hearing, but I thought it was interesting. Is that it? Oh, no, I have the best part.
Why don't you take a minute to summarize the best? I want to hear the best part.
The best part, I think, is the part that is really from the heart. In all of the years I have volunteered at DC's animal shelters, the only dog that ever bit me was not a pit bull, not a Rottweiler, but a Dachshund, okay? I've walked interacted with and photographed thousands of dogs of all breeds, sizes, and weights. Most of them thankfully went on to become loving family members, and it really broke my heart to see families waiting outside or in the shelter lobbies having to surrender their pets, children and even adults crying when saying goodbye. The children couldn't understand why their pets had to be taken away all of a sudden, and the animals were beyond confused. My written testimony goes into other examples of ways to do homeless shelters combined with pets and animals based on the experience with Katrina. But in closing, I would like to say that I heartily support the bill. I hope the entire council will support the bill. I hope the mayor will sign the bill. And in my limited capacity, I'd be happy to work with you also.
Thank you very much. So now everyone knows the workaround around the buzzers to say, oh, the next part was my favorite part. Thank you very much for being with us. Next witness is Kate Finman. I see you with us
Hi.
virtually. Welcome.
Hi, Councilmember White, committee members and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Kate Finman. I'm a Ward 6 resident, a member of Volunteers for HRA Reform, and a former volunteer at the animal shelter. I'm here today to urge you to pass this bill. As you well know, DC has a housing crisis and a pet crisis. With current pandemic era tenant protections being stripped and rents increasing, people are struggling to stay in their homes. The affordability crisis is compounded for people with pets, as our city lacks affordable vet care options, and the government and its current animal care and control contractor have not offered low-cost spay-neuter options in over 5 years, despite being required by the code. As a result, the shelter is overflowing with animals. Animals are being held in small cages and crates, and they are suffering the consequences of not receiving proper care. Adoptions are slow, and animals are waiting months on end in horrible conditions to find their forever homes if they ever get the opportunity to. Many of these animals were once very loved, but their people were put in difficult situations by preventable economic and housing circumstances and were forced to make a heartbreaking choice. With this bill, you have the opportunity to prevent people from having to make these impossible decisions, and you can keep families together. The ongoing harm of pet rent iniquity is endless, and many current DC pet owners have no resources when being affected by the housing crisis. The shelter is not properly accepting owner surrenders. At best, people are given a surrender appointment months in the future and left without immediate options, which is often not practical. More concerningly, we've seen many people outright turned away, or even more heartbreakingly, forced to sign on to euthanasia for their pet in order for the shelter to take it in. People should not have to choose between the safety
All right. Kate, if you can hear, you'll accept promotion. For some reason you got booted, but we can put you back in.
She's out entirely if she rejoins.
Okay. I'll tell you what, we will keep moving, and then Kate, when you rejoin, we will promote you and join you back in. So we will turn to Lauren Loney with Human Animal Support Services. I said humane earlier for obvious reasons. Lauren, welcome.
Thank you so much, Chairman White, and no problem at all. We have a lot of acronyms in this space. My name is Lauren Loney. I'm here in several capacities, professionally as a staff attorney for a project called Human Animal Support Services. I'm also an independent legal researcher on policies impacting pets and rental housing. On a personal note, I am a Ward 1 renter with 3 dogs and also a landlord that intentionally exclusively rents to pet owners without any additional cost to the tenant. I'm here to testify in strong support of the Pets and Housing Amendment Act and share a bit about why my research in this space also supports this important work. First, we have found in one study that, and this is supported by others' research, that non-refundable pet fees and rents are often implemented in both racially and economically discriminatory ways. This strongly indicates that legislation is needed to mitigate these harmful practices. In our work, we have found that lower income rental units are more likely to have additional fees for pets than their luxury counterparts in the same cities, and that renters in census tracts that are majority non-white pay proportionally greater fees than renters in census tracts that are majority white when accounting for income differences. This research is one of the reasons why we have collectively recommended an amendment to the existing language that any monthly pet fees should be relative to the amount of rent a tenant pays. If we're going to allow monthly pet fees to be charged, there should be a strong focus on equity in each case. Second, you may have heard the threat or fear that legislation like this will simply result in fewer pets allowed rental units on the market. Others today have mentioned Colorado's House Bill 1068, which is similar to this bill and became effective on January 1st of this year. The passage of House Bill 1068 created a perfect natural experiment for our research cohort to assess the validity of this fear. So we started collecting the number of pets allowed rental listings in 5 cities in Colorado in early summer of 2023 in anticipation of this bill. We now have around 15 months of data, which broadly shows a U-shaped curve over that period of time. The most recent data shows that the number of pets allowed in rental units in September of this year is essentially equal to the number seen at our baseline in 2023. While we're still in the early stages of analyzing this data to better understand the factors impacting these trends, what we know to date suggests that this threat or fear that there will be this great drop-off of pets allowed rental units if legislation like this is passed simply did not bear out in Colorado. Finally, our research supports what we already know anecdotally, which is that the impacts of this issue truly go far beyond the contractual agreement between a tenant and a landlord. We've found that in just 21 animal shelters in the US, more than 28,400 pets were relinquished over a 4-year time span due to housing, and that pet relinquishment because people are losing their homes is on the rise. It's our tax dollars and donations that are footing the bill for this systematic destruction of bonds between renters and their pets. And frankly, it's another example in the rental industry of the ways in which property and protecting profit are considered over the families living inside. So thank you, Chairman White, for the time today and for championing this important work. We respectfully urge that the committee vote yes on this act and the proposed amendments that will make this bill even more effective at protecting tenants and their pets. And I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you being with us, and we will go back to Kate Finman, who has rejoined us.
Thank you so much. So sorry about that. Ironically, the foster pity managed to unplug my computer. I'll continue.
Sabotage.
Yes. People should not have to choose between the safety of a roof and getting to keep their beloved animals, and a hard situation should never be made harder with impossible decisions about the pet's life. I understand that the government is changing how it runs animal care and control, and I sincerely hope that the government or the next contractor will adopt more compassionate policies. However, DC will still face an impossible space crisis, and real changes need to be made if we are to prevent future tragedy for people and for their animals. This bill is one of those changes. This bill will keep pets out of the shelter and with their families. It will keep people housed, which is public safety. It will make it easier for people to adopt and foster shelter animals, which will limit the amount of time pets spend suffering in the shelter and make it possible for the shelter to take in new animals promptly and compassionately when needed. To sum it up, DC tenants and DC animals sorely need this bill. I look forward to seeing you all do the right thing and implement this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and glad you could rejoin us. Alicia Prigoski, Strategic Legislative Affairs Manager for the Animal Legal Defense Fund. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chairman White and members of the Housing Committee. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Alicia Prigoski with the Animal Legal Defense Fund. That is an organization dedicated to protecting the lives and advancing the interests of animals through the legal system. I am speaking today on behalf of our hundreds of DC-based members in strong support of the Pets in Housing Act. In a personal capacity, I also happen to be a former DC renter who had to navigate finding affordable housing with a pit bull type dog, and then also a pet inclusive DC landlord. So I've experienced this issue through multiple lenses, and I can unequivocally say that this legislation is urgently needed and can benefit renters, landlords, and pets alike. This bill would advance both the interest of animals and the people who consider them family. I think it was Susan who already mentioned this statistic, but 97% of Americans see their pets as family members. I would guess that many here today share their lives with a companion animal and really, truly understand this special bond. This bond is not one that should be broken by the inability to find affordable, accessible, pet-inclusive housing. But unfortunately for renters in the district, this is an all too common occurrence, and they have to make that excruciating, impossible choice to either give up their beloved companion animal or risk not finding safe and affordable housing. According to the Pet Friendly Housing Initiative report, 72% of renters noted that pet-friendly housing is difficult to find, with affordability of pet-friendly housing being cited as a significant barrier. And moreover, that report found that only 8% of pet-friendly housing is free of those breed and weight restrictions that cause so many problems and make it virtually impossible to find affordable, accessible, safe housing for so many. The Pets in Housing Act could go a long way toward breaking down the barriers to accessible housing and offer much needed housing stability for individuals and families with pets. It would also reduce tenant turnover for landlords and incentivize the adoption of animals in desperate need of loving homes at a time when the sheltering community is experiencing an overpopulation crisis. The Pets in Housing Act would make DC a more equitable and humane city for humans and animals alike. I encourage you to support this legislation, and Chairman White, thank you for your leadership on this legislation.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you being with us. Dr. Shanetta Malkia-Sapp with the PMs of the city and NARPM DC. I see you on the Zoom, but there we are. I think there we are. Welcome. And you, and we hear you?
Can you hear me clearly?
Perfect. Yes, if you are able to speak up a little bit, that'll help, but welcome.
Awesome. That sounds good. Good afternoon, Chairman White, and thank you so much for this opportunity to speak to the council about this proposed bill. I am Dr. Shanetta Malkia-Sapp. I am the CEO and broker for the PMs of the City and the PMs of the City Realty. I'm also the president for the DC chapter of NARPM, the National Association of Residential Property Managers. We represent about 200 managers that are in the District of Columbia. We are compelled to strongly oppose this proposed bill. And while this bill is undoubtedly and well-intentioned, the implications that are severely flawed are going to hurt quite a few residents, and they're going to hurt quite a few tenants and housing providers. This bill's provisions do not account for the significant issues and challenges that landlords already face, particularly in the terms of property damages, legal disputes, and increased maintenance costs due to pets in the rental units. The pets deposits and the financial losses, the potential cap of the security deposits at $300 grossly underestimates the actual cost that we face as housing providers when dealing with pet damage. According to a study by Firepaw Inc., the average pet-related property damage is about $1,500 per incident, which is 5 times the amount that you have in your proposed bill. These damages are not limited, but include, you spoke about it earlier, hardwood floors. Well, if a pet uses the bathroom on a floor and it damages one area, you can't typically just repair that one area. You have to typically repair that entire room. We're also going to talk about the walls. When we think about cats, we've had pets, urinate on walls. We have about 200 units that we oversee in the District of Columbia for different small individual housing providers. The landscape is very different from larger organizations. The $300 cap is just insufficient, and it does not cover the cost, and it leaves housing providers vulnerable to the financial losses that we've already faced in dealing with some of these challenges. As a result, some landlords are going to continue to say have a no pet policy at their properties. While we are a pet-friendly management company, I have 2 little Yorkies myself. I love pets. We also know that there's an abuse on the Emotional Support Pet Act. We know that people are fraudulently providing documents that are saying that they have emotional support pets, and they do not have that. The limitations in regard to the pet rent of $25 a month is another unrealistic economic restraint. We've heard that today. A lot of small housing providers provide additional costs for their properties and for their tenants that are very different for larger organizations. The operational costs for maintaining rental properties and pets often exceed the amount due to wear and tear, pet control issues, and potential insurance liabilities, which you've heard earlier today. Based on analysis of national trends, landlords charge an average of $50 to $75 for pet rent each month. We charge $40. That turns out to be about $450 for the year. The capping rate of the $25 just also proposed another legislation that takes away the opportunity for the housing provider to set the rules at their particular property if they have a single family home or a condo compared to a multifamily building. The breed restrictions and the weight restrictions, prohibiting landlords and restricting them from stating what type of breeds can live in their home based on the size and the weight fails to recognize the practical realities of property management. Data from insurance companies shows that certain breeds of larger animals prevent higher risks. That's natural. Higher liability claims and property damages. The average claim for dog-related damage is over $35,000 per incident. My daughter, at the age of 6 years old, while we lived in a multifamily community, was attacked by a pit bull and her ear was ripped off. And we had to rush her to Children's Hospital to have her ear reconstructed. That we found later on that particular owner did not have any insurance. And also found that the dog was not allowed. It was not on the lease agreement. The dog was not permitted to be in the property. We know that pit bulls, while they are not, the breed itself is not the aggression, it sometimes deal with the owners and the care of the animals. So we have to take all of these things into consideration. When we look at the breed restrictions, we minimize the aggressive behavior risks that are at the properties. We reduce the liabilities for both tenants being injured and for landlords, housing providers. We reduce the residents' concerns. Imagine seniors living in a building, or you have children living in a building where they can't walk down the hall because the owner cannot control their dog. Some of these aggressive behaviors are not intentional, but they happen. Accidents happen. You avoid potential damage. We also want to think about the conflict amongst pets. Sometimes pets are just aggressive and they don't get along with other pets. When we don't have proper screening in place in regard to making sure individuals have proper vet records and proper documents to show that they are properly caring for the rat and shots, so that if there is an incident, that we can go to that pet owner to find out the details of this pet. That is also important. We also recognize that tenants sometimes use pets as an aggression towards housing providers to keep them out of their homes when they don't want to comply with inspections. So there are a lot of different scenarios that have been overlooked. Simplifying this particular bill impacts housing providers, small housing providers, in a great disadvantage. The financial requirements outside of the barriers that housing providers already provide to multiple individuals, no matter what ward you live in, no matter what the type of background you come from, we have to look at the realities of the fact that we want to keep our communities safe. We want to make sure that residents, as well as their pets, who are family, are able to find housing, but we also have to make sure we hold these individuals accountable. We looked into some of the history of proposed and opposed bills. It was proposed and opposed in Colorado. It was proposed and opposed in Florida. And it was proposed and opposed in Texas, as well as in New York. This takes away individual owners' rights from setting the particular parameters and the limitations at their property as an owner. It takes away their bundle.
Dr. Marquez, I'm so sorry. You are 2 minutes over now.
No problem. I will
all right.
submit my written testimony, and I thank the council for taking the opportunity to listen to our concerns today.
I appreciate it so much. I do have a couple questions for you if you're able to stay.
Yes.
Our next witness on this panel is Dr. Crystal Waters. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for providing me this opportunity. My name is Dr. Crystal Waters. I'm a primary care provider. I'm a pet owner, and I'm a housing provider. I am a small-time housing provider. I was inherited a property from my mother, and so I'm happy to speak today. I am a partner in terms of helping with the housing situation in DC, and as a responsible stakeholder, I felt compelled to speak on this issue today. I I strongly oppose the Pets and Housing Amendment Act as it is written for several reasons. The language in this bill could, in fact, undermine the financial and operational viability for housing providers, especially small time providers as myself. I don't have a big capital account. You know, this is something that I am trying to make sure that I'm able to provide affordable housing. Um, so the reasons why I'm opposed to this bill, first, the capping of the pet security deposit to $300. Um, that does not cover the increased exposure and liability and potential damages that could be caused by pets. These amounts are often increased as well. It is well documented that having a pet can increase the cost for homeowners insurance, as it has been mentioned here today as well. Pet ownership is an element that insurers use to determine risk. The Forbes reports that in 2022, the average cost of a dog bite claim was over $64,000. A total of $1.13 billion was paid out by insurance companies as a result of dog bites in 2022. There's a high-profile example of this danger on WJLA in February of this year, 2024, reported a news story about a tenant in DC who had 31 dogs, and the homeowner was powerless to provide any protection for the other tenants or the immediate surrounding residents of the district. And although the homeowner was actively seeking eviction, there was still exposure to litigation. The provision for holding deposits for damages in excess of ordinary wear and tear is too vague. There are extensive costs related to remediating flea infestation, pet dander, scratches on floors and walls, removing odor and feces and urine stains. And the nebulous term ordinary wear and tear opens the door for endless disputes and legal complications, which could strangle an already overburdened court system. Secondly, I see my time, so let me, I had a lot to say, but I do want to say that the prohibition against imposing restriction based on the pet's breed and size and weight, it is impractical. I understand it's well-intentioned, but it is not practical. Housing providers do not live in a different reality than the renter. We are subject to the increased costs associated with certain breeds. Even the Federal Housing and Urban Development HUD agrees that reasonable limits are in order. Larger animals or specific breeds may pose potential or greater risk, and housing providers must retain the discretion to make the decision to safeguard their property and other tenants. In that case, with the 31 dogs, the owner had 2 pit bulls and they attacked a 2-year-old girl and her guardian. And that situation ended in a police barricade, a shooting, and police officers were injured. So I'm going to skip down to the end where I just want to say that the fiscal impact statement, it would inevitably be passed down. The increased cost will be passed down to the tenant. In the mayor's fiscal 25 budget, there is $101 million to rehabilitate and modernize public housing units managed by DC Housing Authority, and $4.2 million to help low-income homeowners make critical upgrades to their homes. These are wonderful initiatives, but where is the line item for small-time landlords, small-time housing providers to help subsidize the increased costs that can be caused by a bill such as this? So in conclusion, I just want to say this bill is short-sighted because it does not take into account the delicate balance of providing homes for people with pets and providing a safe environment for people who without pets, and then also protecting the interests of the homeowner. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you being with us. Taylor Lavelli, Government Affairs Manager for the Pet Advocacy Network.
Thank you, Chairman White and members of the committee for allowing me to speak with you all today. My name is Taylor Lavelli and I'm here on behalf of the Pet Advocacy Network. The Pet Advocacy Network represents the interests and expertise of retailers, companion animal suppliers, manufacturers, distributors, pet owners, and others throughout the District of Columbia and the United States. So on behalf of the responsible pet care community and pet owners throughout DC, we ask that you add rabbits, snakes, and ferrets to the list of pets that would be included in limiting the amount of fees and deposits that a housing provider may charge a prospective tenant. The Pet Advocacy Network commends the Council of the District of Columbia and Chairman White for proposing a limit on the predatory fees pet owners often face to keep their animals in their home. Pet fees are often non-refundable, as many of my colleagues have spoken about today, and can be a discriminatory practice that leads to poor housing security and increased evictions for marginalized populations. The Human Animal Bond Research Institute, or HABRI, has assembled scientific evidence that demonstrates how pets improve heart health, alleviate depression, increase well-being, support child health and development, and contribute to healthy aging. We believe that all pet owners should have access to the benefits regardless of their living situation. So the Code of the District of Columbia, Chapter 18, Animal Control, states that rabbits, non-venomous snakes, and ferrets are also legal to own in DC, in addition to the pets that are listed under the definition of common household pet. So we believe, again, that all Washington, DC pet owners should be able to benefit from the important changes that the Pets and Housing Amendment Act of 2024 would put in place. The act should encompass ferret, snake, and rabbit ownership as well, since these animals offer the same benefits as other pets listed and are legal to own in the district. We welcome the opportunity to work with you all on future legislation that promotes and protects responsible pet ownership while removing barriers to pet ownership for all. Thank you so much, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Lisa LaFontaine, CEO of the Humane Rescue Alliance. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chairman White and staff of the Housing Committee. I'm so grateful to you and everyone who is testifying on behalf of this legislation, because we're tackling an issue that is wreaking havoc on the lives of DC residents. At the Humane Rescue Alliance, I see the effects of restrictive and unfair housing laws on people and animals every single day. And as the past chairman of the National Federation of Humane Societies and the Association of Animal Welfare Advancement, I'm in regular conversation with cohort leaders of other humane societies who also face this growing crisis in their cities. But many of them aren't lucky enough to have legislation like this. Since the pandemic, our nation's shelters have been over capacity for dogs, and this is through no fault of the dogs themselves. Dogs are staying in our shelters longer. Fewer people are coming to adopt them. More and more humane societies are forced to house dogs in crates, emergency housing, or doubled up in kennels. Those who have built new kennels watch them fill up immediately because having more space does not deal with the underlying problem. And the dogs who suffer the most are the larger dogs, 40 pounds or more, who stay with us the longest, here in DC and everywhere else. And it isn't just dogs. In the past 5 years, 1,902 animals have been relinquished to us because a landlord had a restriction or there was a housing issue. So that means that every single day a DC resident comes through our doors, usually in tears, to hand over a beloved family member. They walk back out feeling like a failure. Most of them fought a valiant battle to never see this day. They are grieving just as we do when a pet dies. We don't talk about this grief and the ripple effects it has on a life, a family, and a community. And they leave behind frightened and traumatized and confused pets who often try to run out the door behind them and climb in the car. It's a really traumatic scene, and our staff, many who are DC residents, they absorb this pain each and every day. It's an unnecessary and preventable tragedy for everybody involved. Over the past 2 years, our pet support team has gotten 31,100 calls from folks in this city who are desperate for help as they try to keep their pet. Many of the problems are housing related. HRA received a grant from PetSmart Charities to better pinpoint and understand what the challenges are that DC pet owners face and what are the complex reasons behind their decisions to surrender. It went deeper than the conversations we can have in the lobby when people are in a state of trauma and they just want to leave. We did surveys, focus groups, GIS mapping of all of our data. We interviewed people, and the results are clear and crisp. DC families are being torn apart for 3 primary reasons. Either there's a minor behavior problem in the pet that is easily fixable but gets overwhelming, a lack of access to or ability to pay for a veterinary visit, or most significantly, issues with landlords and housing. So this step is a really important step forward in DC's progress. It'll make things more fair and equitable and improve the lives of thousands of DC families, the people and the animals alike. It's also transformative because it's going to house people who are unhoused. It's going to help people who are unhoused. Having low barrier human shelters will help keep pets and their people together and out of our shelters. But I think even more importantly, oftentimes people who are unhoused are not going to go in out of the cold on a winter night and leave behind the only family member they have. So this is really a common sense provision of the bill. And as a big-headed dog lover, I'm especially happy to see that breed-specific fees and restrictions will be eliminated. That may help people adopt more of our pets, as some of the panelists have mentioned. We are deeply grateful to you and to all the sponsors of this legislation for your resolve and your leadership. HRA is going to do everything in its power to help you pass this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask fewer questions of this panel because there are some folks who haven't testified yet that are running against some time restrictions. So if I don't ask you questions, it is not because you didn't have powerful testimony, just because I understood it very well in some of the issues we've gotten into already. Let me ask Lauren Loney first. What about this issue of liability for landlords? Do you, in your research and work, do you have what would you say to a landlord who's concerned about the liability from, say, like a tenant being bitten by a dog?
I think that I first want to just note that, and there are going to be some other people who testify on their own research on this later, but studies report the average amount of financial damage, including a fire paw study. At worst, the worst average at about $430. On average, pet owning tenants in that study were reported to have caused about an average of $362 in damage. Non-pet owning tenants in that study were reported to cause approximately $325, $323 in damage. So the difference between non-pet owning and pet owning tenants is essentially statistically insignificant. So I do just want to point out that we're talking about liability. That financial component is, I think, an understandable fear, but doesn't actually bear out in reality in most situations. When it comes to liability, this bill and none of the legislation that we have worked on elsewhere prohibits a landlord. As a matter of fact, we would, we would encourage landlords to meet the pets that they are allowing onto their property, as Susan mentioned, to have clear, strong, and reasonable pet policies on site, including leash laws, things like that, that tenants are expected to follow. I think, if anything, by allowing pets and encouraging more transparency, and somebody else said this earlier, between the tenant and the property manager or the landlord, you're actually going to reduce liability because you're not going to have people hiding their pets. You're not going to have people not doing the things that they need to do to appropriately care for their pet in a rental space because they're not afraid of what's going to happen if management sees that pet. So I think that there are still plenty of things related to liability that can be done that have very little to do with the breed, weight, or size of a pet. And frankly, the research doesn't bear out that thousands of dollars a year in additional fees is actually needed to address these concerns. There's no data
I
to support that.
appreciate that. Let me ask Alicia Progoski, in your work, the Animal Legal Defense Fund, is this an issue that you all have looked at, legal liability for landlords?
We have a little bit, and I can definitely follow up with some more specific, concrete information. But just sort of in a really broad sense, I mean, I think Lauren touched on a lot of what we have found as well. And in addition, looking at those insurance policies, we recommend that renters get insurance policies. We recommend that landlords get things like umbrella insurance policies to really minimize that liability should something happen. What we have seen is that the incidents are usually more minor when they do occur, kind of on par with what you would expect, normal wear and tear, renting to just human renters without pets. But that is what I would add in terms of the liability issues. Yes.
Okay. Dr. Malkia Sapp, if you would send us the data you cited, we have sort of competing data here on the actual cost of pet damage being closer to $1,500. Is that something you could send to us?
We most certainly can. We have different categories of damages for each person and each pet. So each case, so that's definitely something we can send you. We have actual cases where we've had people be evicted and they've had pets that they've left and we've had to have them sheltered and the damage that the pet has caused in the home. We have other residents that have left homes and left walls that are bitten or door frames that are bitten. We've had homes where we had to have the entire home deep cleaned and a special treatment because our new tenants coming in were allergic to pets and they could smell the pet dander that was left in the units. So there are many different cases in which the damages are going to vary.
I appreciate it. I mean, we're sort of looking at average. Obviously, individual cases could be very low or very high. So we're going to look at a broader set of data. But in the instances that you mentioned, the deposit, even the higher deposit, I assume it was higher than what we would restrict it at in this bill, would not cover that damage. So who was responsible for the balance?
So typically landlords are eating the damage. If the security deposit is 1 month's rent and the tenant is leaving with any damages, it's going to come from the security deposit. The non-refundable pet deposit isn't typically for our organization. It's not more than $500. So that's $500. If it's a deep cleaning for a unit, the deep cleaning is going to be about $425 when we have pets and they're doing a specialized cleaning for pets. So that $500 non-refundable deposit is already eaten up. It depends on what the damage is. It could be minimum, it could be extreme.
But so landlords do not charge tenants for damage beyond the amount covered in the security deposit?
We can list it, but typically it's a fight back and forth in regard to whether the tenant disputes it or agrees with it or not, which is why we do video move-in inspections and we do move-out inspections with video with the tenant there. And we have the different pet policies in place. So a lot of small housing providers and housing providers in general have a pet addendum that lists all of the property and community rules when it's relating to pets. Of course, individuals don't always follow these cases. When you think about some of the apartment communities that may limit 2 pets to an apartment, well, if we think about the well-being of a pet, some of the pets, larger pets being in a 700 square foot apartment, which is a 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom, we're in DC, it's not healthy for the pet. So we do have to put certain limitations on there. And those are things that I also see that were not thought about in this particular bill.
I appreciate that. And I'm really sorry to hear about the injury
My daughter?
your daughter
Yeah.
sustained.
Yeah, that was a very uncomfortable situation because the pet was not registered. The pet was, of course, a breed restricted pet, and the landlord had been working on trying to get this pet out of the community and already had the tenant in a breach of lease case. So outside of the fact that the tenant did not have proper insurance, the hospital bills that we had to pay for my daughter, and she is traumatized to this day of dogs. She does not deal with dogs at all. And then, of course, you have to consider people that just don't have a relationship and don't care for pets. They still have a right to find communities where they are thought about as well.
Dr. Waters, I appreciate you being with us and your testimony. You know, I want to note, you know, one of the things you cited in your testimony as tenant with 31 dogs. I do just want to be clear, this is outside of the scope of the bill. That what that tenant was doing was likely already outside of what is allowable in their lease. So that's an issue where someone broke the conditions of their lease. We would not allow people to break the conditions of their lease here, or have sort of unlimited animals in their unit. So that's a different issue. But on this issue, one of the concerns you raised, that's, you know, very, I think, fair to raise. You mentioned a concern over endless disputes over normal wear and tear. But of course, many landlords allow pets now. Is this concern of endless disputes over what it does and does not constitute normal wear and tear, is this borne out in the experiences of landlords that allow pets now?
Well, excuse me. I have just found in my experience dealing with the court system in DC, particularly the landlord and tenant court, many issues, if it's nebulous, it is endless back and forth. And housing providers do not have access to free legal as extensively as tenants do. So many times, housing providers are forced to accept whatever the consequences are, and it can be quite costly. So if you have a term like normal wear and tear, there should be some definition or some kind of guideline, you know, instead of just a broad term, because that can be disputed, you know, endlessly. I mentioned the case of the man with 31 dogs. I know that is an extreme case, but again, the landlord-tenant court process is so congested that even if you have been responsible in terms of the pet owner and those things, if anything goes wrong, it is so difficult to have anything straightened out. So it is important to be specific in your wording of this bill. My objection to this legislation is the way it is written, because it leaves too much. It's too much open territory. It really needs to be fine line so that everyone is clear.
I appreciate that. I think, you know, wear and tear is defined in the law already, so we don't further define it. If you have other specific recommendations, would you send them to us so I can make sure we are considering those?
Certainly. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Those are all the questions for this panel, because again, I want to make sure we're able to get to everyone. So thank you all so much for being with us. Our next panel will.
So this is 10 people. That includes.
Thank you.
Includes.
Right. To keep things moving efficiently, I'm going to call 6 in-person witnesses. So the first 4 will be at the table, and the next 2 will rotate in. I want to make sure we don't lose anyone. Natalie Joplin, Nicola Ivanoff, Abigail Paulson, Ross Barker, Kelly Whittier, Kathleen Robertson, Erica Gandolfo, Senior Policy Associate with the Animal Welfare Institute, Conrad Bennett with the DC Association of Realtors, Holly Bice, Best Friends Animal Society, Alexa Stro, Ashay Anthony, co-founder and executive director of Layla's Legacy Animal Rescue, and Adam Prinzo, Commissioner, no. Adam Prinzo, Commissioner of ANC 3C02. Natalie Japlin, I see you. Welcome, and you can begin your testimony.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the council. My name is Natalie Japlin. I'm a volunteer for Layla's Legacy Animal Rescue, as well as the Humane Rescue Alliance. I have lived in Ward 2 for the past 5 years, and I want to express my unwavering support for the Pets and Housing Amendment Act of 2024. This legislation is a crucial step towards fostering inclusive and compassionate housing policies while ensuring that all parties, landlords, community members, and businesses profit. Washington, D.C. should prioritize passing the Pets and Housing Act as a strategic investment in enhancing the city's appeal for current and prospective residents. In a competitive real estate market like D.C., accommodating the needs of pet owners can significantly influence potential tenants and buyers' choices. Investing in the Pets and Housing Act aligns with DC's broader economic goals. The city aims to attract and retain a skilled workforce, and many young professionals prioritize pet-friendly living situations when considering relocation. As companies increasingly recognize the importance of employee satisfaction, cities that promote policies catering to modern lifestyles, such as pet ownership, become more attractive destinations for talent. By enacting this legislation, DC not only enhances its housing market, but also positions itself as a progressive city that values the well-being of its residents, both human and animal alike, ultimately fostering a more inviting environment for investment and growth. I will briefly mention my own experiences. My partner and I are both fully remote workers who have chosen to remain in Washington, D.C., primarily because of the community we've built here that revolves around our dog, Peaches, who I adopted from the Humane Rescue Alliance in 2021. Every single day, we talk to the same neighbors, business owners, local workers. We also talk to a lot of people who are coming here for conferences since we live near the convention center. We've all gotten to know them through Peach's friendly disposition. Peaches happens to be a commonly restricted dog breed. We love it here in DC, but our future in the city is heavily weighted by our ability to find breed restriction-free housing on par with what we'd be able to get in cities where breed restrictions have already been banned or restricted, like Los Angeles or San Francisco. New York is well on its way to banning breed restrictions, but I would rather see DC lead the East Coast to this next step in progressive legislature. I'll note that those cities have been able to ensure that landlords are adequately reimbursed for damages caused by pets, while seeing the benefits of removing breed restrictions, including a reduction in dog bites, an increase in pet adoptions, and a decline in the number of dogs surrendered to shelters and euthanized. The amendment is vital in promoting fair housing practices that recognize the emotional and mental health benefits that pets provide, and it empowers individuals and families to keep their beloved companions, ultimately fostering a sense of belonging and well-being within our community, one that I benefit from and one that my other fellow dog owners also recognize. I urge you to support this important legislation. By doing so, we can work together to dismantle outdated stereotypes and create a more inclusive environment for all pet owners in Washington, D.C. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you so much, Ross Barker. And I will need you to accept promotion. Excellent. And then unmute and we'll be ready to go.
There we go. So many buttons.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair White and members of the committee. I am grateful for your leadership on this issue. My name is Ross Parker. I'm the Program Director for Pet Inclusive Housing, representing the Michelson Center for Public Policy. We work closely with the multifamily housing industry to build mutually beneficial solutions to keep pets and families together. The Michelson organization champions pets wherever they intersect with society, and our Pet Inclusive Housing Initiative provides data and resources to help rental housing providers create more housing availability for people and their pets. We appreciate the opportunity to testify in support of the Pets and Housing Amendment. We also appreciate the testimony that has come before mine. It's good to see our research and data being brought into this discussion. I'd like to share several data points from the Pet Inclusive Housing Report, which is a large research study conducted in collaboration with the Human Animal Bond Research Institute. And these hold particular relevance for this proposed legislation. So relative to capping rent, pet rent and deposits and eliminating non-refundable pet fees, our study found that only 9% of pet-occupied units report any form of damage. And among those units, the average damages are only $210. This proposed fee limits in this bill would annually total about $900, which is more than compensating housing owners for their typical damages, emphasizing typical. There will, of course, be damages that exceed this figure, but those are rare, and we think it's important to look at the more common outcomes. With almost 60% of renters reporting that pet-friendly housing is too expensive, the fee caps in this legislation offer impactful relief for them. Relative to eliminating breed and size restrictions, our study found that while 76% of rental housing owners believe they are pet-friendly, 72% of renters say that pet-friendly rental housing is hard to find. So there's this overwhelming disconnect, which is perhaps explained by the next statistic. Nationally, fewer than 8% of rental housing units are free of breed and weight restrictions. It's even worse in DC, where only 6% of rental units are free of these restrictions. This not only creates a barrier to entry for many pet-owning renters who have large or typically breed-restricted dogs, it exacerbates the all-too-common overcrowding in our nation's animal rescues and shelters. We've heard a lot about that today. 14% of renters say they have had to make the heartbreaking decision to choose between housing and their four-legged family member, or three-legged. In a lot of cases, we see those too, just as much fun. Additionally, consider this. The average weight restriction among rental housing units in the US falls between 20 and 50 pounds. This means that at least 6 of the American Kennel Club's top 10 most popular breeds are not allowed to live in the majority of rental units. This includes Labradors and Golden Retrievers and standard poodles. So dogs we wouldn't think about being restricted against, but based on weight or breed or both, they will not be allowed in most rental units. The positives of this bill, which result in more pets for rental housing owners, are impactful. Our research shows that pet owners generally stay 21% longer than non-pet owners. This decreases turnover costs, vacancy costs, and drives significant dollars to net operating income. In one case study, and I think this relates to one of your earlier questions, Chair White, we looked at a a 4,000 unit Atlanta-based property management company that had lifted breed and size restrictions. These changes alone drove an average of an additional $166,000 annually per property to the bottom line. And it's important to note, with no increased incidence of behavior issues. Additionally, as 2/3 of US pet households have a pet now, eliminating these restrictions greatly expands the pool of available renters. And according to rental housing owners, makes units easier and faster to fill. That concludes my testimony. Thank you again for the opportunity, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you very much. Kelly Whittier.
Good afternoon, Chairman White and staff of the committee. My name is Kelly Whittier. I am a Ward 4 resident and volunteer with the People in Pause Coalition for Affordable Housing. Many of our members spoke earlier today, and I think covered a lot of what we're really trying to do with affordability for tenants and the human animal bond. So I thought, instead of reading my testimony, I would share a quick experience I had as a volunteer with a point-in-time count in the District of Columbia, which I strongly encourage anyone here to do. It's a very meaningful experience, and I think really offers, hands-on insight into some of the challenges that people who are unhoused face in DC. And so years ago, my first time volunteering, it was, I don't think we were quite in a cold emergency, but it was like a frigid night in DC in January. The wind was going through all of my layers, like there was no protection at all. And I was partnered with, a caseworker in the area. And the first gentleman that we came across who was staying outside and opted not to go into shelter, we sort of, rustled his sleeping area to see if he was, well and awake and responsive. And all of a sudden, a big blockhead pops up, and it was his companion animals, a big, beautiful pit bull who was just sort of blinking at us like he couldn't believe we woke him up. And then his owner soon followed afterwards in the same state. And this was someone who was known to the caseworker. So they had an established relationship. And the caseworker was like, this is a really tough night. We're here doing, they call it the PIC, the point in time count. We can offer you transport services to shelter, and there's also temporary boarding services that are also available. And once that boarding services was proposed to this gentleman, he gave a 3-word answer, which I will cut down to 2 words, which was no way. And he, at that point, the sort of like the relationship changed. He felt this concern that the people who are really there to help him, to gather some data, to help the city better address, his needs and other people's needs, was a threat to him staying with his pet, right? Even with all the promises and assurances in the world, people who have been let down many times over by services, are dubious about those offerings, which I think is completely fair. At that moment, I was like, I'm with him. I totally understand. Animals don't judge us. They love us at our best and our worst. And in a world where I think a lot of people feel very isolated and alone and overlooked, that relationship and bond becomes all the more precious to maintain. And so I wish I could share some of like the DC data about, how many people who are unhoused also have companion animals. But I don't believe that exists in a comprehensive way. The point in time count form is full of sections to fill out. At the time, and please, I hope the agency can correct me if this has changed. At the time, there was no section to fill out whether they had an animal or not. That gentleman declined to participate, and he was one of 3 people that evening who we encountered with pets. And the woman that we had met said she was waiting for a ride to a friend's house to spend the night. So, I think people are resourceful. They try to find different avenues for shelter for them and their pet, and sometimes that doesn't work out. And so I, would strongly encourage, connecting with some of our other partners. Our coalition has reached out and heard some great excitement from homeless services providers. So I believe the committee will receive some really strong written testimony in support of this provision of the bill, as well as suggestions such as prioritizing non-congregate shelter and bridge shelter as, the opportunities to try out what this would look like in DC. And I'd also just like to share that, our coalition is here today and we are here with you through the full enactment of this legislation. And that includes, helping to support the district to identify foundational funding, federal funding to help implement, this critical component of the law. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us and for your work on this. Kathleen Robertson.
Hello, thank you for this opportunity. I am speaking in my personal capacity as just another DC resident who loves her house hippo. I'm a resident of Ward 6, and I was a proud supporter of the Decline to Sign campaign, but I am again speaking in my personal capacity here. I appreciate the opportunity to provide virtual testimony in support of this bill, specifically against punitive pet peeves and against breed bans. First, pets are not inherently more destructive than adults, children, or acts of nature. However, punitive pet fees can prevent families from affording adequate housing for the whole family, prolonging homelessness and contributing to unwanted surrenders, which break up a family and further burden an already strained rescue and shelter system, as a number of people have already commented today. Current landlord protections should be sufficient to recoup excessive tenant damage, whatever the source. Second, breed bans are discrimination clothed in pseudoscience. No reputable evidence suggests pit bull terriers or any other type of dog are inherently more or less likely to be dangerous. Like the satanic panic of the 1980s, this appears to trace to occasional hysterical coverage, notably from such prominent scientific publications as Sports Illustrated, of select dog bites that fit our prejudices. Personally, I know 3 people that have been bitten by dogs, 1 poodle and 2 dachshunds. This is truly nurture over nature. Pit bull terriers are fabulous family dogs and were previously, in fact, rightly known as America's dog. I personally have a 5-year-old rescue, and he is a fan favorite in my neighborhood with adults, kids, and other dogs. Sadly, we do know he has to be better than non-bully dogs to account for prejudice. My written testimony will include pictures of this lovable lump who definitely improves my home and neighborhood. Thank you for this opportunity, and I vote in favor of B25-827, the Pets and Housing Amendment Act of 2024, to prohibit punitive fees and nonsensical breed bans. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Erica Gandolfo, Senior Policy Associate with the Animal Welfare Institute. Sorry about that. You would. Perfect.
Important detail right there. Good afternoon, Chairman White and members of the Housing Committee. Thank you for this opportunity to testify on the Pets and Housing Amendment Act. My name is Erica Gandolfo, and I'm the Senior Policy Associate at the Animal Welfare Institute, also known as AWI. As a DC resident with a beloved 80-pound pit bull Great Dane mix, I know firsthand the challenges of finding affordable, pet-friendly housing. Prior to AWI, I worked at Muddy Paws Rescue, where I met hundreds of animals surrendered by heartbroken families due to the lack of affordable, pet-friendly housing. I vividly remember animals with lipstick marks still on the back of their head, a sign of a devastating goodbye. Each surrender is a stark reminder that we can't truly help animals without helping people. On behalf of our DC members, AWI expresses its gratitude to the Council for addressing this problem that people and companion animals alike face. The lack of pet-friendly housing in DC manifests in one of three ways: outright prohibitions on the ownership of pets in rental properties, charging unaffordable deposits and fees, and the lack of housing and services for homeless individuals who have pets. We especially welcome the provision in the bill directing the city's Department of Human Services to ensure at least one shelter for homeless individuals or families with companion animals. This is a significant and complicated issue, and we hope the Council will consider devoting a separate hearing to it soon. Today, I'll focus on the benefits of making more pet-friendly rentals available in DC. Many studies show that landlords who allow pets without breed or size restrictions dramatically increase the number of qualified applicants for their units. Apartments.com reports that 9 out of 10 renters consider pet policies a key factor when choosing where to live. Additionally, landlords with no pet restrictions see an 11.6% rental premium compared to those who prohibit pets. AWI acknowledges that DC competitive rental market already offers landlords many willing applicants. However, expanding the pool by welcoming tenants with pet increases the likelihood of finding long-term renters. Studies show that tenants with pets stay significantly longer, reducing turnover and marketing costs. Concerns about pets causing damage are largely unfounded. Statistically, fewer than 10% of pets cause damage, and pet-owning tenants cause no more damage than those without pets. Allowing pets fosters a stronger sense of community. 73% of dog owners and 49% of cat owners report feeling closer to their neighbors due to their pets. Studies also show that pets help reduce crime, as dog walkers are more likely to notice suspicious activity and enhance neighborhood security through greater community engagement. We appreciate this bill that this bill exempts affordable housing residents from non-refundable pet fees or additional rent. However, for those who don't qualify for affordable housing yet, can't afford luxury rentals, the combination of pet deposit and monthly fees creates a financial barrier to keeping a pet. This burden also reduces the pet owner's budget for essential care, such as food, supplies, training, preventative treatments, and emergency vet services. Shelters across the DMV, including the Humane Rescue Alliance, are facing a crisis of overcrowding, primarily driven by the lack of pet-friendly housing. Pet owners forced to move often have no choice but to surrender beloved pets just when they need stability and support the most. Prospective adopters face similar barriers while animals face an uncertain future. Data from Shelter Animals Counts shows a 22% increase in euthanasia rates in 2023 compared to the previous year. AWI welcomes the serious consideration this bill gives to the lack of pet-friendly housing and ceilings on deposits and fees that this act would establish to recognize the need to lower barriers to pet ownership. But those expenses will still affect pet owners disproportionately depending on income. We hope the Council will consider limiting the amount of those deposits and fees to at most 1% of the rent. This step would further expand the opportunities for pets to remain with their families, for DC residents to bring new pets into their families, thereby relieving the overcrowding in our animal shelters. We think this additional step would get closer to accomplishing the Council's purpose. Thank you very much for your time, consideration, leadership, and letting me go over.
Thank you very much. I'm grateful that you're with us today. Conrad Bennett with the DC Association of Realtors. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember White. On behalf of the DC Association of Realtors and our over 3,000 members, I'd like to express our appreciation for the opportunity to provide feedback on the Pets in Housing Amendment Act of 2024. As advocates for the real estate professionals, housing providers, homeowners, and renters in the District of Columbia, D. Carr brings a wealth of experience on housing-related matters, and we are committed to collaborating with the council to ensure balanced and effective housing policy. As we understand, the bill is well meant with intent. It simply puts the Housing Amendment Act with numerous unintended consequences. Several concerns stem from the limited placed on pet security deposits and monthly rents. Housing providers have the responsibility of repairing damage to a unit caused by tenants' pets. Pets can cause physical damage to carpet, paint, baseboards, subflooring, doors, windows, and window screens, etc. Urine odors, in particular, are extremely difficult to remove once they are set in surfaces such as concrete, carpet, and wood. In addition, expensive repairs can lead to delays re-renting the unit, creating additional financial strain on small housing providers. It's important to note that in many cases, the amount collected in deposits and pet rent do not cover even half of the total costs of repaired damages. For the sake of example, the Home Blue Contractor Network is an organization that connects customers and contractors. They explain that the cost of painting the interior of a house in Washington, D.C. can range from $1.80 to $4.20 per square foot plus material. Interior painting costs for a 12 by 14 room can range from $1,100 to $2,600, averaging $1,800. Please keep in mind that this cost is just to repaint, nothing else. To suggest that tenants are responsible for any additional repair costs beyond the suggested $300 COP would be to assume that tenants will be agreeable to make those payments after moving out. Unfortunately, that's not the reality, and the only recourse a landlord would have is to spend even more money trying to take the tenant to court. Combining the standard security deposit with a set pet security deposit does not fully consider the financial feasibility of the situations that may transpire from pet damage. As consideration of this bill continues, we implore the committee to consider the financial difficulties this bill could result in for housing providers. Additionally, current law in the district limits security deposits of a rental unit to no more than the equivalent of the first month's rent, which we would still like to get additional clarification on. The limitation indicates that the landlord shall not impose restrictions based on pet breed, size, or weight. This fails to take into consideration any existing pet restrictions in a condominium or cooperative. Further, many property insurance companies impose restrictions on certain breeds of dogs, so the property owner must abide by those rules in order to be protected. Finally, we understand that the intent of the bill is to ensure that pet ownership for the district unhoused population does not become a barrier for individuals obtaining the housing they need. However, we are concerned that the legislation will work against what it seeks to do. If a housing provider is concerned that they will not be able to generate the income needed to attend to these repairs, it could lead providers to not permit pets in their units outright. With these concerns in mind, our recommendation is to allow housing providers to charge a separate but fully refundable pet deposit based off of a percentage of rent charge not to exceed an additional half a month's rent. This approach would strike the balance between protecting tenants with pets and ensuring that the housing providers have the resources to maintain their properties. Carr is eager to continue working with the council to shape policies that support housing access while protecting the interests of both renters and housing providers. We would be happy to discuss the potential impacts of this legislation further and provide any additional insight from our membership. Please do not hesitate to contact us with any questions.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Holly Bice with the Best Friends Animal Society. Welcome.
Hi there. Thank you so much, Chairman White and members of the committee today. My name is Holly Bice. I'm with Best Friends Animal Society, and I'm testifying in support of the bill. And also on a personal note, I do work with numerous dog rescues in the DC area, and I work on the effort to overturn the pit bull ban in Prince George's County, Maryland as well. Many of the stories and struggles that witnesses have talked about today are very much like what I hear all the time. And people really do consider pets to be part of their family. They love their pets. It's a part of their family. 2/3 of American households include at least one cat or dog. However, the problem is that there isn't enough affordable pet inclusive housing. People are being unfairly forced to decide between keeping a roof over their head or surrendering their beloved family member to a shelter. In fact, housing issues are the top most common reason that families surrender their pets to shelters, even ahead of financial reasons. In a 2019 national survey, 72% of people said that pet-friendly housing is hard to find. And even when pets are allowed, renters face unreasonable barriers such as high deposits, high pet fees, and restrictions on certain breeds of dogs, such as pit bulls. I think it's important to emphasize that breed restrictions just simply don't make sense. Studies show that banning pit bulls does not decrease dog bites, it does not improve public safety, and pit bulls are not inherently aggressive dogs. Additionally, DNA testing has shown that it's extremely difficult to correctly identify the breed of a dog just by simply looking at the dog. So while a dog you might think, oh, that's definitely a pit bull, but the dog might actually be a mix of a Labrador Retriever, a Whippet, a Boxer, or a number of other breeds. The lack of pet-friendly housing is also taking a toll on animal shelters. Last year, over 1,000 cats and dogs were killed in America's shelters every single day simply because they didn't have a safe place that they could call home. Considering that DC has only one shelter serving the entire city, it's especially important to protect that resource for the animals and the people who truly need it, and not allow the private market industry with its excessive pet fees and barriers to dictate how many animals end up in the taxpayer-funded shelter. I want to note, though, that this situation doesn't always have to be about landlords versus renters. There are benefits to landlords, too. Studies show that tenants with pets stay significantly longer in their rentals, on average about 23 to 46 months. And landlords also spend less on advertising with pet-friendly housing. In closing, this bill provides a reasonable and much-needed solution, and I encourage the committee to support this bill to help keep families together and reduce the killing of animals in shelters. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Alexa Stroh, welcome.
Dear Chair White and members of the Housing Committee, my name is Alexa Stroh. I'm a DC resident and I've worked professionally with pets for approximately 10 years. Breed discrimination is financially burdensome to shelters and therefore to taxpayers. This is evident when you look at the types of dogs available in local shelters. Many of them are assumed to be breeds or mixed breeds of dogs that are typically restricted or banned by landlords and/or insurance companies. Removing breed-specific policies will make it easier for people to foster and adopt dogs. Eliminating non-refundable pet fees, including pet rent, and capping pet deposits will also be immensely helpful in making it more affordable for people to foster and adopt all types of pets. Refundable pet deposits should be capped as a percentage of the rent rather than a flat rate. This will be more equitable for people of a lower socioeconomic class. My service dog and I were participants in a study that was published in 2022, where the owners of 18,385 dogs were surveyed, and the DNA of 2,155 dogs was sequenced. The study concluded that most behavioral traits are heritable, more than 25%, whereas breed offers little predictive value for individuals, explaining just 9% of variation in behavior. Additionally, studies have found that there is little to no difference between damage to rental units caused by pet owners versus non-pet owners. Therefore, breed-specific policies and legislation are not supported by research on canine behavior or damage to rental properties. Providing at least one shelter to unhoused persons that allows pets is not only important for preventing the rehoming of pets, it is also crucial for those who are experiencing domestic violence. After experiencing domestic violence a handful of years ago and having my dog's life threatened, I became much more aware of the statistics regarding domestic violence situations and pets. Let me share a few. 97% of domestic violence survivors report keeping pets with them is an important factor in deciding whether or not to seek shelter. Half would not consider shelter for themselves without their pet. 71% of women in domestic violence shelters report their abuser threatened, injured, or killed a pet. Nearly half of victims stay with an abuser rather than leave their pet behind. Up to 40% of domestic violence victims are unable to escape their abusers because they are concerned about what will happen to their pets when they leave. As many as 25% of survivors will return because the abuser is using their pet as a means to get the person back. Only 12% of domestic violence programs can provide shelter for pets. Victims of domestic violence have been known to live in their cars for as long as 4 months until an opening was available at a pet-friendly safe house or shelter. Just a couple of months ago, I learned about a woman who was living in her car with her dog because she was experiencing domestic violence. Sorry. Didn't think I was gonna get emotional.
Take your time.
One sec. Didn't think that was gonna hit me. Obviously it did. She wasn't able to go to a shelter because she had her dog with her, but she also wasn't willing to surrender her dog. People should not have to choose between staying in an abusive situation with their pet, leaving their pet with an abusive person, surrendering their pet so they can access a shelter, and living in a car or on the street with their pet. I strongly encourage you to support this act. Thank you for your consideration. Also, just to add, I have a bunch more research, and I'm happy to provide any of my, professional experience in working with dogs in particular over the years. I'm also a dog trainer, and also willing to help out and provide any research statistics.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you being with here and the offer to help. We may need that. Ashay Anthony, co-founder and executive director of Layla's Legacy Animal Rescue. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chairman White and council members. My name is Ash Anthony, and I'm the co-founder and executive director for Layla's Legacy Animal Rescue and a resident of DC for 10 years. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and I'm here with a resounding support of this bill. Before I share why the Pets and Housing Amendment Act is so important from the perspective of an animal welfare professional, I want to share a personal story. Since moving to DC, I've lived in almost every ward of the district, and I currently live in Ward 7. In 2019, I signed for an apartment with a very steep pet deposit. It was $2,500. That was on top of the $3,600 deposit required as a baseline for me to get the unit. I'd been searching for 3 months, and even with my extensive list of resources as a DC resident and as an animal rescuer, I was either being denied due to my dog's appearance and breed limitations or facing an even larger pet deposit and monthly pet rent. In August of 2019, I lost my job and I couldn't maintain the steep cost in rent, particularly with the hit that my savings already had for this massive deposit. My landlord was kinder than most and gave me a 48-hour warning that she was going to give me an official eviction notice. I was officially facing homelessness. As you noted, I couldn't fathom leaving my dogs behind, and so instead of going to a shelter, I bought a blow-up mattress for the back of my Jeep, and I was fully prepared to live in my car. Thankfully, I was somehow offered a job with just 20 hours left to spare before I was evicted. I was able to negotiate because I had knowledge of the DC tenant law to be able to get 30 days notice to find another apartment, and I was able to find a space in Trinidad that allowed 2 dogs. I am the luckiest of most of the humans that are navigating our DC tenant law, and that is purely because of the immense amount of privilege that I have. And that is not something that we should be standing for in DC. Everyone should have access to safe housing for themselves and their pets. That said, and moving away from my personal experience, I want to take a moment to share perspective as my role as the executive director at Layla's Legacy, one of the few DC-based animal rescues. We are founded with a mission of saving dogs impacted by breed bias, while also educating people on individualistic training and responsible pet ownership. As such, outside of our role for adoption and foster programs for our animals in care, we offer owner support and rehome programming. Since our launch of this program, we've received hundreds of requests for help, and we only launched in 2023. Over 60% of the documented asks that we have in our system were noted that there was a barrier to the owner keeping their pet, even if we provided them with massive support because they could not find housing. For some, this was affording pet rent. For others, it was the breed limitations because we are primarily bully-based org. And for others, it was just that they were facing shelters because they had fought for so long. This doesn't include the asks that I receive via phone, text, because they know that I work in rescue, or at events when we're out in the community. To help paint the picture of the impact that each of one of those humans in the 60% has, I'll share about a dog that we saved named Quincy. Quincy's owners lost their job in 2023 and had to go to a homeless shelter. That homeless shelter that could accept them did not allow dogs, and because they had children in the home, they had to make that choice to leave Quincy at a shelter. We were notified of his story, and we were able to pull him out of the shelter before he was euthanized and place him in a foster home. Even though Quincy's owners were able to find a job and were ready to seek housing within 2.5 months of losing their job and going into a shelter, none of the homes that they were able to find, even with the support of DC support and social services, allowed them to have Quincy because he appeared to be a bully type dog. So not only did Quincy not be able to go back to his family, that family had to have a heartbreaking choice of losing their dog, but the resources that our rescue had to put into saving Quincy, using the foster home, the financial support for him, for his vetting, for his behavior support, was directed away from another animal in a shelter. As a foster-based organization, our ability to save lives is only feasible through foster homes and donations. And while we are so glad we saved Quincy, the act placed forward would have kept Quincy with his family and ensured that we could save more lives. Thank you again for letting me speak and for putting this forward into DC law. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have as a DC resident, tenant, or as an animal welfare professional.
Thank you very much. And Commissioner Adam Prenzo, Commissioner for ANC 3C02, who is with us virtually. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony before this committee. I am Adam Prinzo, Advisory Neighborhood Commissioner for 3C02, representing Woodley Park in Ward 3, as well as a rescue dog dad to 5-year-old Aggie. I am testifying today on behalf of myself as a commissioner, as well as on behalf of ANC 3C, authorized by a letter that was submitted in support of this bill. We are here today to express our support for Bill 0827, the Pets in Housing Amendment Act of 2024. Pets play a significant role in the lives of many people, offering companionship, emotional support, and even overall physical health benefits. However, the joy of pet ownership can sometimes be overshadowed by the challenges it introduces, particularly when it comes to finding suitable housing. Many landlords and housing providers impose strict pet policies or additional fees, making it difficult for pet owners to secure suitable accommodations. These obstacles highlight the ongoing tensions between the desire for a pet-friendly living environment and the practical concerns of property management. These policies, however, disproportionately affect low-income families, individuals with disabilities, and people of color. Furthermore, studies have shown that housing stability improves when people are allowed to keep their pets. People are less likely to stay on the street or surrender their pets to the shelter if they are able to stay with them. In our letter, ANC 3C offered the following comments. First, ANC 3C is fully in support of the Pets in Housing Amendment Act of 2024. And we further are in support of the provisions that cap pet security deposit fees at $300 a month, $300 and a monthly pet fee of $25 a month. ANC 3C asked the committee to look at the possibility of a provision that allows tenants to pay on an annual basis as opposed to a combination of monthly rent plus a pet security deposit fee. That was actually raised to us by one of our committee members whose building gives tenants the option to pay an annual fee as opposed to month to month. Furthermore, we also would just like to understand the impact on current leaseholders and whether we would, or apartment owners would have to go and update current leases for current tenants. ANC 3C is in support of making those said pet security deposit fees refundable, so long as the pet does not cause any serious damage to the home. And ANC3C is fully in support of requiring the Department of Human Services to ensure that at least one low-barrier shelter is available for individuals or a family experiencing homelessness who have a pet. Having a shelter that allows pets to provide a safe haven for individuals and families without forcing them to abandon their beloved family members, reducing the stress and the additional stress, I should say, of homelessness. On a personal note, I rescued my dog Aggie from the North Shore Animal League in Long Island, New York, the longest running no-kill shelter in the United States. I will say that Delta was not too happy with me when I added a pet on my return trip, but oh well. Aggie shortly moved to the district within 2 weeks, and she began to love her weekly walks on the mall and her annual trips to watch the Nats during Pups in the Park. She quickly morphed from a domiciled puppy to an excited, engaged, and sometimes feisty dog, almost as if she was always meant to be a DC dog. Aggie and I quickly became mainstays at our local dog park, and it was there where our neighbors encouraged me, and I say that she too, to run for ANC. In conclusion, the bill is a comprehensive, forward-thinking approach to addressing inclusive housing in the district, and I urge the council to pass it. And I'm here for any questions that you need. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will be brief with questions with this panel. I do have a couple though. Natalie Joplin, you mentioned in your testimony that jurisdictions that have already eliminated breed restrictions have not seen an inability of landlords to collect for damages to property. Do you have anything that we could look to? Okay, I think we lost you, so we'll reach out. Ross Barker, thank you for being with us. You mentioned there's been a lot of data on the average cost of damage. Could you send us whatever you were citing so we can look at that along with the other data?
Absolutely. And I think that the damages question is also important for us to start thinking about in terms of different types of units, but we can definitely provide that information. I'll send you the report and we can drill into data further if you need that.
Excellent. Really appreciate it. Kelly Whittier, thank you for being with us and for the work that you all are doing. Lisa LaFontaine, thank you to Humane Rescue Alliance for all of your work on this bill and similar bills. We look forward to continuing to work with you. Kathleen Robinson, you mentioned something in your testimony that had me thinking. You mentioned reductions in crime and you cited dog walkers. Reminded me, I think it was 2 chiefs ago, Chief Lanier, Kathy Lanier said, one of the best things people can have is a dog because dogs bark. And that's one of the best prevention systems from our former chief. But thank you very much for your testimony and for your recommendation in your testimony. Conrad Bennett, thank you for being with us. Something I do want to clarify, I might have misunderstood your testimony, and it made me think about previous, some of the housing providers, not all the housing providers testified against the bill, but there was some concern. The bill does not limit security deposits. This is money on top of the security deposits specifically for pets. So that would be $300 in addition to whatever the monthly pet fee is. So we will work with you all to make sure we fully understand your concerns and the concerns of purchasers and landlords to make sure we address those concerns as best we can in the bill. Holly Bice, thank you for being with us today. Alexa Stroh, appreciate your testimony and all the information you gave us. We may need or may utilize some of that in our report. And I was making notes. Did I mispronounce your name? Is it a she?
It's Ash.
Ash, thank you. I think she said does something different, but I missed what it was. Thank you, Ash. Ash Anthony Zever. Thank you very much for being with us, for your testimony and for your work. And the experience you outlined is helpful in framing this bill. And Commissioner Prinzo, thank you very much for your testimony as well. I want to move to our government witnesses. So thank you to you all and to all of our public witnesses. Really helpful testimonies as we look to finalizing and moving this bill. So we will move to our government witness, and I want to welcome Director Laura Zeilinger of the Department of Human Services. And as you know, it's the practice of this committee to swear in our government witnesses. So I ask that you raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you are about to provide to the Committee on Housing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you so much. If you would hit your microphone and you can begin your testimony.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Chairperson White, members of the staff and Committee on Housing, and members of the community. I'm Laura Green Zeilinger, Director of the Department of Human Services. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony at this public hearing on Bill 25-827, the Pets in Housing Amendment Act of 2024. I would like to start by acknowledging that animals can have a profound impact in the lives of individuals and families who lovingly care for them. Caring for a pet is often challenged during a housing crisis or episode of homelessness, when individuals or families may face the difficult decision of separating from their pet when emergency or shelter or housing does not provide pet-friendly services. And although we recognize the emotional difficulty of being separated from a pet, we do not support the proposed amendment to the Homeless Services Reform Act under the Pets in Housing Amendment Act of 2024 for 4 reasons, which I will detail in my testimony. First, our qualitative and quantitative data does not support the level of need. Second, the bill's mandate comes with considerable cost at a time when our system is severely cost constrained. Third, the bill would be extremely challenging to implement under our current shelter operations framework. And 4, while addressing the needs of people with pets, the bill introduces new health and safety challenges into our shelters. In the district, we do not have data indicating that a significant number of individuals or households experiencing homelessness are choosing not to enter shelter due to restrictions on bringing pets. The results of the 2024 point-in-time count show that 19 unsheltered individuals and 1 unsheltered family owned a pet, representing less than 2% of unsheltered households and 0.4%, so less than 0.5% of all households experiencing homelessness on the night of the point in time. The district's Interagency Council on Homelessness recently conducted a survey on shelters, and among the 143 individuals experiencing homelessness who participated and provided feedback, only 1 person mentioned service animals or pets in their response, but none cited it as a reason for choosing not to enter shelter. Over the past year, street outreach teams engaged 15 individuals experiencing homelessness who had pets. When asked if they would enter shelter if their pets were allowed, many of those residents shared they would still refuse to come into shelter with pet-friendly services. Outreach teams note that unsheltered residents cite various reasons for avoiding shelter, including concerns about safety, past negative experiences, and the desire to retain freedom and autonomy from shelter rules. However, the inability to bring a pet into shelter was not identified as a deterrent. We're working on all of those issues, and we recognize that some states and jurisdictions across the country are shifting toward pet-friendly programs and shelters. However, widespread demand for such programming doesn't currently exist in the district. When residents experiencing homelessness present at one of our shelters requesting an accommodation under the Americans with Disability Act for their service or emotional support animal, DHS follows established procedures to ensure the resident and their animal are supported in shelter. As of October 4th, there were currently 2 service animals and 1 emergency support animal residing in single shelter with their owners. Secondly, DHS is not currently funded to implement the amendment as proposed. The bill mandates that by October 1st, 2026, the district must establish at least one low barrier shelter for individuals or families experiencing homelessness with pets. That should say and families. This would be a resource-intensive program and without proper funding. DHS cannot move, and without proper funding, DHS cannot move forward with the implementation. Costs could include pet supplies, additional cleaning, augmentation to shelter setup, and veterinary services. Additionally, not to mention staff training. Additionally, dedicating one shelter to accommodate pets could reduce overall shelter utilization, as some individuals may choose not to enter if their only available option is a pet-friendly shelter and they themselves do not have a pet. When a resident enters shelter with a service or emotional support animal, always we find other shelter guests frequently are complaining and asking to be moved, and they're also upset that they feel like they shouldn't have to be moved in order to accommodate another person. So moreover, if additional space in shelter was repurposed for pets, there may be a need to reduce overall bed count at a time when we are wanting to maintain enough beds for people who experience homelessness in our system. DHS contracts with community organizations that are trained and qualified to provide services and resources to people experiencing homelessness. Our provider network does not have the expertise or staffing or contracted responsibilities to care for pets in shelters. An animal welfare organization or agency with proper facilities, trained staff, and expertise in managing pet-friendly services and care would be better suited to handle the aspects of sheltering pets that are proposed in this bill. Additionally, several considerations must be addressed when co-sheltering people and pets in a congregate setting. Shelters are not designed right now to accommodate pets, and concerns around sanitation, pet waste, odors, pests, potential disease could significantly impact daily shelter operations, as well as staff recruitment and retention. Also, the presence of pets could negatively affect other clients, triggering animal-related fears and allergies, potentially leading to an increase in residents, again, choosing unsheltered living situations such as encampments. In closing, DHS understands that when a family experiences a housing crisis, the forced separation from a family pet can exacerbate the trauma of homelessness. And as previously mentioned, we accommodate individuals and families with service animals or emotional support animals. In cases where a pet cannot enter shelter, we work with pet owners seeking homeless services to find alternative housing solutions for their pets, including temporary fostering options with family, friends, or local organizations who provide those pet care services. Our Interagency Council on Homelessness, the Community Partnership for the Prevention of Homelessness, assists with pet deposits to help households secure permanent housing. Additionally, we connect families to the Humane Rescue Alliance for access to pet food supplies and low veterinary care. Thank you for the opportunity to share my testimony. I'm available to answer any of your questions.
Thank you very much, Director. I appreciate you being with us and appreciate your testimony. I was trying to recall actually after one of the earlier witnesses asked, I've done the point in time count the past 2 years. I don't remember there being a question about pets, but there are a lot of questions. So I may just not remember. Is there a question about pets?
I'm not sure if there's a question, but we do capture that data. And this is the first year, I think, that we've captured it. So we've asked people to note that on the forms. I'm not sure if it's through one of those check mark questions, but it is data that we're paying attention to. We again are watching what's happening nationally on this issue, particularly in cities that have a higher unsheltered number of people who tend to also have a higher number of people who are unsheltered with pets, who have begun to introduce shelters with pets.
How do we capture the data on the number of unhoused people with pets through the point in time count?
Through the same way we capture all of our data, through surveys and volunteers. We also, as you know, have outreach teams under contract with the city who cover the entire District of Columbia, who are out in our communities each and every day. And we also have surveyed them about what they're seeing to continuously understand the changing attributes and needs. And we asked them in particular, in preparation for this hearing, what they're seeing in terms of people who are unhoused with pets, how many people are out there, and to talk with them about what kind of services they need and what would it take for them to accept shelter.
Okay. I just want to make sure I'm not missing it here because I did the point in time count this year and last year. How, if it's not one of the questions, how
I
is it?
didn't say it wasn't, I just said, and I can ask, I just don't know if it, I don't know for certain that it was this year, but I know that we have data from the pit, which because of that, I figured that we do, but I will check.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out the source of our data. As you check, and we can come back to that. The DHS currently has a relationship with HRA to shelter pets for unhoused residents. Is that right?
With who are experiencing domestic violence, that through the domestic violence community. And then we also informally are connecting people when there's room.
Okay. Do you know how many pets end up in the district's animal shelter through that partnership?
No.
Okay. Do you know if there's a how that sheltering partnership works? Is there a timeline? So is there a limited time that that pets can be there in HRA shelter through that partnership?
So that is I know you had a HRA testify, it's an HRA question. DHS doesn't have a formal relationship or MOU with HRA around pet sheltering. We know that there's this relationship between the domestic violence providers and the domestic violence intake with HRA, but I can't speak on the details of that agreement or the time and shelter. We just work with people each and every day to problem solve all of their issues, including I have a pet. Often people have an emotional support animal, but they may be lacking documentation. We work with them on obtaining the appropriate documentation so they can bring in their emotional support animal with them.
So for people who have service animals, let's assume they have documentation, how does DHS handle that for residents
So
experiencing
service animals,
homelessness?
they actually don't need to have separate documentation. They just need to have they need a reasonable accommodation request. So that, and they need to have a specific disability, and they need to, the pet needs, or not the pet, the service animal needs to, they need to state what task that service animal executes for them, and it has to have a relationship to their disability. For an emotional support animal, they need to have, again, a reasonable accommodation request, then a note from a treating professional that validates that this person requires an emotional support animal. We do make a provisional placement frequently while people are obtaining documentation.
So for a service animal, how does that work in practice with respect to access to shelter?
They would come in with their service animal.
Okay.
And we do have people who do that. We have a service animal right now at Pet Handy, another person with a service animal at 801 East, and someone with an emotional support animal at Emory.
Okay. And how does have there been issues with service animals or emotional support animals that inform DHS's position on this bill?
So what would inform, I think the thing to be informed that should inform our thinking on this bill is what just the operational impact on other people in the shelter who get upset when somebody has an emotional support animal or service animal and don't have allergies or asthma or other things where they feel it's just not comfortable, or phobias around animals, and they want to be moved to a different part of the dorm or a different dorm when someone else brings in an emotional support animal or service animal. So we end up having to do shuffling, and they feel, why should I be put out because this other person needs an accommodation? It's just something the shelter provider has to navigate, and we train them around that, and they do. And that's fine. That's their rights under the law. I'm not pushing back on that. It's we want to do, can do, should do. But that is different than people just being able to bring pets. And and how that impacts, because we don't foresee that there would be so many people with pets that it would warrant dedicating a specific shelter. And that would then impact other residents in a way that would be challenging for our system. Does that answer your question?
Yes. What impact do service animals or emotional support animals have on staff or staffing of the shelters?
I'm not aware that we just train them around what they need to do in that. And sometimes there's additional cleaning and maintenance related to the presence of an animal in the shelter.
On the concern around cost, which I think is the second concern you raised in your testimony, you're aware that council's legislation can't be implemented until it is funded.
Right.
Okay. So beyond that, what is the concern around cost?
That we don't have the funds and that our system right now is financially constrained in a way that we've had to make reductions across the board to a lot of our programs and services. And so because the size of the need here for pets in shelter and the constraints that we have on the range of services and needs, it seems challenging if we were going to try to reallocate funding towards something, how that this is solving a large unmet problem without creating other problems. And we have other problems that need resources that we're not able, where we're reducing funding. So one, it's not funded, so we couldn't do it without funding. And two, I think it would be challenging to prioritize this, given that it hasn't shown up as a significant need in our community over other issues where we do need resources.
Well, let me come back to let me first clarify. I don't think, and I'll check with my team, I don't think our legislation says only people with pets could be in the pet-friendly shelter. Instead says that there must be one shelter to accommodate people with pets. So it wouldn't not allow people who don't have pets to be in shelter. But to the point of, and so like everybody who's not sheltered probably needs shelter, whether they have a pet or not. We agree on that.
We agree on that, but I think it ignores the fact that sometimes people without pets prefer not to be in a shelter with pets, and it has an impact on them.
Okay.
And so if they can't be accommodated somewhere else and they feel that and the smell of an animal bothers them, they're afraid of animals, they don't want to get out. We've had people tell us when someone has an emotional support animal or even a service animal, they're scared to get out of bed and use the restroom at night because they're afraid of animals, and a person in their dorm has an animal, that kind of thing, that makes that a larger issue for people who have those kinds of everyday things. And there aren't a lot of beds in the system, and the last few beds are in the shelter that has pets. That has an impact on our operations and our services for people who may feel that way. So while we want to accommodate people who have pets, we don't want to create new problems for people who don't.
I mean, it sounds like, and I know you, so I don't think this is the intention. It sounds like we have a sensitivity around people who may not like pets, but it doesn't sound like the same level of sensitivity for people who have pets but won't relinquish them. And I'm trying to, I don't think that's what you're saying.
Not at all. And thank you for clarifying, because I do feel, and I tried to start my testimony by saying so, but I didn't want to overly restate something and then say, and sound like it was disingenuous, because right at this point, the way the bill's written, we don't feel like we're in a position to support it. But of course, we are sensitive to the needs of all people, including those with pets. There are just so many fewer of them who are seeking homeless services than people who have pets, particularly people who have pets who say, if I could bring my pet with me, I would come in. And so that's the point I'm making. Like, I feel like we're solving for a problem that is really small, because also many people can bring their pets because their pets are also their emotional support animal, and they do.
Yeah.
And we're able to accommodate that and we figure it out. But it's different. I think just opening the door beyond that risks creating, sort of solving a problem for few, and they matter.
Mhm.
But it also doesn't really take into account the needs of what we see are many who are gonna, it's a trade-off, and and it's a balance we would need to think about as we think about how we would implement this.
So back to the question of there being no data to show a significant need. You were going to clarify this piece, because I don't remember it being on the point in time count questions, but you were citing data.
It is a question on the point in time count.
Excellent. Okay. Could you share that with us?
Share a copy of the data.
The data.
Yeah, and I did. I just told you what it was, but I'll share it.
Thank you so much. And on the concern around implementation, challenges, I think it's staffing and expertise, this is were you were saying DHS staff don't have the staff or expertise, or that we couldn't contract with people who have the staff or expertise?
I'm saying that right now, the people who run our shelters, that's not part of their scope of work, and they're not staffed or trained to know how to accommodate people with pets, nor do we have the veterinary services on site. So you're probably familiar with the federal bill that also contemplates funding potentially for homeless programs where you can co-locate sheltering. We've done some research on this, and that bill, if passed, would allow for funding for veterinary services and training and special sort of reconfiguration of spaces, all of which would need to be contemplated. It would be a change in scope
Mhm.
to ask our shelter providers to be able to safely accommodate people with pets and manage that situation. And it would require either a rebid or a change in scope, or that we also subcontract with another organization, but it changes the management and operations of the shelter. And if we need to create space within the shelter for people with their pets, it may reduce the number of beds, which is also, as I noted, an important consideration, because this last summer, we did not have enough year-round beds in our single adult system.
Right. And we don't propose taking away any beds. We propose adding them. On the scope of the contracts, is the scope of the contract or our current contracts the same for adult shelters versus family shelters?
There are different contracts for adult shelters and family shelters.
So we changed the scope of the contract based on the need that we're meeting in the shelter?
Yeah, we do.
Okay. So we could do that here. If this bill passed and was funded, then we would change the scope of the contract.
And it would require a rebid. So if we're in an option year, it would, I mean, there's a certain amount of administrative work and time.
Why would
do
it
that.
require a rebid?
Because if it's considered enough of a change from what was originally proposed,
Mhm.
then we can't just augment. So it would just need a review. I couldn't tell you without talking to our attorneys whether we would need to rebid or not, whether it would require, but if it's considered a significant enough change in scope, you can't just, as you know, augment a current grant or contract to add something that was not,
Right.
considered.
Okay. Yeah. So if this were to go into effect at a shelter that's currently being operated, it would require us, possibly, depending on when that contract ends, to rebid the contract.
Possibly.
Okay. Does the administration have any comment on the parts of the legislation that don't involve shelter?
Not where, I'm only here to testify on the changes to the HSRA today. So OPLA will be able to advise you on that.
Okay. Okay. I appreciate it. For the public's knowledge, we invite the administration decides who to send. So, I will assume unless I hear otherwise that, there's no position on the rest of the bill. But we will hear that from the
If
office.
there is, I'm sure they'll submit something while the record's open.
Those are all the questions I have, Director. Appreciate you being with us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I want to thank all of our witnesses, our public witnesses, our government witness. For anybody who was not able to testify today, written testimony is encouraged and will be made part of the official record. Anyone who's interested may submit additional testimony by email to the Committee on Housing at housing@dccouncil.gov. The record for this hearing will remain open until the close of business on Tuesday, October 15th, 2024. Just a quick recap. Lots of testimony in support of the bill, some specific recommendations around changing monthly pet fees to be a percentage of monthly rent, so as to address economic and racial disparity issues. There was concern raised from some landlords about whether or not our bill will accommodate the cost of damage for damages to units. Several people cited data around the average cost of pet damage that we hope we will get their citation so we can look into it and get to the bottom of that. Many people with personal experience with animals spoke about that, not from a data standpoint, but from a personal experience standpoint. Number of agencies have provided expertise and have offered to give us some expertise as we move forward. AOBA and DC Association of Realtors is among the folks who are willing to work with us as we work to finalize this bill. And we have heard some concerns from the administration with respect to the shelter portion of the bill, specifically around the cost of implementation, lack of data supporting the need, challenges with implementation, and health and safety challenges that we will look into as we proceed with our work for this bill. If anyone listening is interested in learning, keeping track of how this bill moves or learning more about the work of this committee, please sign up to hear from us at robertwhiteatlarge.com. We will keep you updated. With that, the business before this committee is concluded. The time is now 3:12 p.m. and this hearing is adjourned.